today's papers.
The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its analysis of new Home Office figures, which suggest just 1.6% of rape cases lead to a charge. The Telegraph leads with the headline Cancer Crisis Risks Replacing the Pandemic, as experts warn that 300,000 people have missed urgent checks in the last year due to the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, the Mail and the Express's front pages state that some NHS patients are being told to wait 3 years for a dentist appointment and are resorting to using DIY filling kits. Elsewhere, the Metro's front page celebrates the UK's record-breaking jab surge, which has seen a third of people fully vaccinated. And the Mirror leads with the headline 100,000 Brits off to Spain after the country lifted all measures for UK tourists from today. But the Home Secretary is warning people not to travel to amber list countries.
I'm Emily Rose Adams, and they're today's front pages on Talk Radio TV.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me weekdays from 4 with the biggest stories, the noisiest guests and my daily monologue, where I lay it out straight and don't pull my punches. And then it's over to you. So let's talk. You can hear me on DAB+, in-app and online, and watch me as we stream live on YouTube every weekday from 4 on the home of free speech, Talk Radio.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV. I'm Emily Rose Adams. Here are your headlines. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, has described the diversion of a Ryanair passenger plane mid-air by a Belarus fighter jet as an outlandish action that will have serious implications. The plane was en route from Greece to Lithuania when Belarus claimed there was a security threat, scrambled a jet and forced the Ryanair flight to land in Belarus. Opposition activists says it was done to arrest a dissident journalist on board. A black equal rights activist is in a critical condition in hospital after being shot in the head in South London. 27-year-old Sasha Johnson was apparently injured at a party in Southwark on Sunday morning. Some patients in England are being told to wait until 2024 for a dentist appointment. Healthwatch England has published a report saying some surgeries have thousands of people on their waiting lists, with the pandemic adding to what have been historic problems in the sector. It found people are feeling pressured into paying for private care or even ending up in hospital after overdosing on painkillers. In the next stage of easing COVID restrictions in Northern Ireland, indoor hospitality venues are allowed to serve customers again from today, and 6 people from 2 households can meet inside. Meanwhile, Spain's allowing British tourists to return with no restrictions from today, although the UK government is still urging people not to go there as the country is on the amber travel list. The Culture Secretary has called on the BBC to place more emphasis on impartiality and diversity of opinion. Writing in The Times, Oliver Dowden has accused the broadcaster of adopting a we know best attitude. The BBC's working culture has been under increased scrutiny in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. And more than £1 million worth of artefacts have been stolen from Arundel Castle in West Sussex just a few days after reopening to the public. Rosary beads carried by Mary Queen of Scots at her execution in 1587 are among items taken. An Arundel Castle spokesman said the stolen items were of priceless historical importance. Those are your headlines on Talk Radio TV.
and that the government plans to reduce the incentives for illegal immigration. She says they'll start with people smuggling gangs.
The profits they make fuel other terrible crimes, including modern slavery and extreme violence. They use the same routes and methods to smuggle guns and drugs onto our streets. And we are coming after these gangs.
Ms Patel has also confirmed plans to introduce a US-style electronic travel authorisation, which would require visitors to the UK to obtain an electronic permit before travelling.
Talk Radio National Weather.
So there's showers for most of Wales and England this afternoon, and it's feeling cold in the north of the UK.
Talk Radio Entertainment News.
The lead singer of the Italian band which won Eurovision will have a drugs test today. It's after speculation he had taken a substance during the show in Rotterdam. The rumours were sparked by footage of him leaning over a table.
Talk Radio Entertainment News.
Welcome back to The Art Show. You join me with the celebrated oil painter Renato Valdez and his latest work. Why the choice of emulsion for this piece?
Well, I had some left over from painting the living room, so I thought I'd use it up.
Like getting your money's worth? Enjoy our delicious 99p cheeseburger, part of the McDonald's Saver menu. From 11 a.m, price and participation may vary.
Talk Radio. Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
You'll be finding us on 0344 499 1000. So the local authority who decided to ignore the victims of the Manchester bombing and the anniversary of the death of Lee Rigby, instead they wanted to focus on other matters.
In Minneapolis tonight, tensions are high as 4 police officers have been fired after a man was pinned to the ground and died. The incident was caught on camera, and we must warn you, the images are disturbing.
There it is. Norwich Council held a purple and pink light show to commemorate the death of George Floyd on Saturday. How did they arrive at this decision? We'll come back to that shortly. Also this afternoon,
millions of us are risking the health of our teeth by failing to give them the care and attention they deserve. Visit your dentist regularly so that any problems can be identified and sorted quickly. A healthy smile means a healthy life.
Yeah, all very well, but can you even get to see a dentist? We learned today that some patients could have to wait 3 years to see one. 3 years. COVID strikes again, it seems. 99 1000.
Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
Here's the thing. I think the question here, almost, I mean, there are many questions that will come with this, but the question is almost kind of just why? Why? So on Saturday, I think this is really strange, and I stand to be corrected if you've got a completely different view on this. A council decided to have a moment of remembrance for the death of George Floyd 1 year on. It's actually tomorrow 1 year on, but they did it on Saturday. And so a year, more or less, after he was killed by a police officer. Now, sometimes local politicians do this kind of thing, but what is interesting is where it took place. You might think this would be in the States, but it's not in the States. It was in Norwich. Not Nashville or Nantucket, but Norwich. The City Council put out a tweet saying, City Hall will be lit up yellow and pink and turquoise to commemorate the first anniversary of the death of George Floyd in remembrance of all black lives lost in the aftermath. Firstly, why Norwich? Why do they feel compelled? Hear me out on this. Why do they feel compelled to commemorate the death of a man in custody in a city 4,000 miles away? Why is this the case? Is it because it was on the telly? Is it as simple as that? What possible reason would an English council decide that they needed to have a light show in memory of an American citizen? Now, it upsets a lot of people, of course, because people do cite, this is George Floyd we're talking about here. He's hardly a compelling case, if you like, for a man with a backstory in equality. He's not Rosa Parks. When it comes to integrity and graft and the fight for those kind of matters, he's not the first name on the list. So he's not that. But even that aside, I would still say, why? What's the reasoning behind that? So if it was a statement then about people who die while having an altercation with the police who reside only in the USA, was it that? It can't be, because this wouldn't make any sense. And if you want to look at it that way, since 2020, twice as many white people have been killed by police in America than black people. I know there's a percentage difference there, but even if you factor that in, you will arrive at a different context anyway. So there was no riots or protests for any of the whites who died. Tony Timper. Some of you might be familiar with the story of Tony Timper. He was a white guy who was killed in Dallas in 2016 under very similar circumstances to George Floyd. He pleaded for his life 30 times. "You're going to kill me," he cried, as he drew his very last breath. No protests, no light show in Norwich. Daniel Shaver was a white man shot dead, shot 5 times by cops in Arizona. He was attempting to hand himself in the corridor of a hotel. There's footage of this too. Don't look it up, by the way. It's disturbing. And it's equally as disturbing as all the others. No light show for Daniel. No purple and yellow laser beams firing over the skies of Norwich for him. So it can't be that, which leaves us with another option. Norwich Council are just going for the race card, right? And this is where it gets really interesting, because the death of Floyd, and the interesting thing is that there was no racist component in that at all. Chauvin, the cop who killed him, wasn't in court for a race-related crime. He was charged, thankfully found guilty, of murder, but it wasn't a racist murder. Colour wasn't a factor. Ethnicity played no part. The fact that Mr. Floyd was black and Chauvin was white was not a factor in this case, although you'll remember Joe Biden and countless others were very, very happy to pretend that it was. They invented stories to whip up some synthetic indignation. They nudged the race card. They got people very angry, but they made it up. Let's just be clear about this. It's the story of 2 people, a police officer and a member of the public. Bad police officer killed said member of the public. He went to court. He was found guilty. He's gone to jail. End off. The colour is irrelevant. Chauvin was a bad man. Even his colleagues and senior cops gave evidence against him. It wasn't the police, plural, that killed Floyd. It was Derek Chauvin. 1 man, 1 victim. So why are Norwich Council holding a light show in commemoration of a foreigner's death 4,000 miles away? It's a simple why. 0344 499 1000. So there's all of that to look into. But actually there's something far more disturbing about this. Far more disturbing than all of those points when it comes to what Norwich City Council were doing. And it's this. This weekend saw 2 notable events that should have been commemorated. On Saturday, it was the anniversary of the Manchester bombings, killing 22 people, of course. The youngest victim just 8. Also on Saturday, it marked 8 years since the death of Lee Rigby. Lee, of course, was butchered to death, quite literally in broad daylight, by Islamist fundamentalists. We remember those shocking scenes of his murderers addressing the live TV cameras with blood on their hands. So on the very day that we look to commemorate Manchester, we look to remember Lee Rigby, Norwich Council lit up their council offices with a light show for an American citizen 4,000 miles away. Why? In memory of a man from Minnesota, not the 22 victims of Manchester, not Lee Rigby, but a foreign guy in the United States. What is going on here? Why has this become... Is this going to be an annual event now? And what's the thinking behind it? Can't be race. Doesn't make any... Well, that's what they'll say it is. But it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for a number of reasons, because it wasn't a race-related crime. So that would just be mischief if you're employing that detail on it. It can't just be about people who were killed by cops, otherwise, in foreign countries, I should add, because otherwise you would also be having similar events for people like Tony Timper and the aforementioned Daniel Shaver. So why? Is this the preening of the virtuous whiskers? Is that all that's going on here over there in Norwich? 0344 499 1000. It should jar with everybody. It should particularly jar with the council taxpayers of Norwich, whose local authority saw fit to throw on a light show to commemorate George Floyd, and absolutely nothing for the victims of Manchester or Lee Rigby. Well, you might say, well, it's Norwich, not Manchester or Woolwich. Yeah, or Minnesota. Can I just add that in? 0344 499 1000. Just help me out here. I want to put some meat on the bones of this, just to see where this kind of hysteria has come from. 0344 499 1000. You can text 87222. Start your message with the word talk. We'll go to your calls shortly. You're listening to Ian Collins on Talk Radio. It's just gone 1:15.
Hello, I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers.
The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its analysis of new Home Office figures, which suggest just 1.6% of rape cases lead to a charge. The Telegraph leads with the headline Cancer Crisis Risks Replacing the Pandemic, as experts warn that 300,000 people have missed urgent checks in the last year due to the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, the Mail and the Express's front pages state that some NHS patients are being told to wait 3 years for a dentist appointment and are resorting to using DIY filling kits. Elsewhere, the Metro's front page celebrates the UK's record-breaking jab surge, which has seen a third of people fully vaccinated. And the Mirror leads with the headline 100,000 Brits off to Spain after the country lifted all measures for UK tourists from today. But the Home Secretary is warning people not to travel to amber list countries.
I'm Emily Rose Adams, and they're today's front pages on Talk Radio TV.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me weekdays from 4 with the biggest stories, the noisiest guests, and my daily monologue, where I lay it out straight and don't pull my punches. And then it's over to you. So let's talk. You can hear me on DAB+, in-app and online, and watch me as we stream live on YouTube every weekday from 4 on the home of free speech, Talk Radio.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV.
We did. And that's why we created Ford Live, because we believe keeping your van healthy shouldn't be an optional extra. Your vehicle is more than a tool for work, it's your livelihood. And if it doesn't work, you don't, and we don't want that. To find out more, search Ford Live. We're with you on this journey. Ford Commercial Vehicles, backbone of Britain.
Ford Live is available with connected Ford commercial vehicles.
Talk Radio. Traffic and travel.
The M25 is struggling heading anti-clockwise between junction 26 and the A10. A lorry is getting a tyre change. Plus there's been an accident, so the inside lane's closed. The M1 is queuing heading southbound, Arch Junction 9 at Redbourne. That's following a breakdown. In the West Midlands, the M42 is queuing on the northbound side from junction 4 along to Coventry. That's after a lorry broke down. And the M6 in Greater Manchester is queuing on the southbound side between junction 25 and Bryn. That's after a lorry broke down as well. I'm Emma Bussey.
Ian Collins, weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
A lot of response on this. Thank you to Martin. Well done for mentioning, be the only person, the only UK radio host to mention Tony and Daniel. It's a small fact. And that Martin says, and I'll say that Martin is a black guy himself. Before I read this, blacks are 14% of the US population, yet commit over 54% of violent crimes and get shot at a lesser rate than whites do by police. And all these factors may well be true, but they seem lost on Norwich Council, which is how we've arrived at this discussion this afternoon. It's such a curious subject. I'm pretty sure originally somebody tweeted this to me and said, have you seen what's going on over there at Norwich, lighting up the city's most recognisable landmarks to mark the first anniversary of the murder of George Floyd? I'm thinking, okay, what's the thinking there? On the very day that it's also the anniversary of the death of Manchester victims Anne Lee Rigby. And if you want to talk about people that were killed by cops in foreign countries, if that's the deal, then what? What about all the others? What about Tony? What about Daniel Shaver? Where are they in this story? If you're looking at us on the live stream, you'll see the image of City Hall, Norwich. City Hall. Yeah, there it is, all lit up nicely in memory of Mr. Floyd. Their City Hall was lit yellow, pink and turquoise in remembrance of his death, and all black lives lost in the aftermath. Mr. Floyd died in Minneapolis, of course, after police officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck. Tomorrow marks 1 year to the day of his death. Quite why they did this on Saturday, I don't know. He was found guilty, of course, Chauvin, and is due to be sentenced in June. In all probability, he will correctly spend the rest of his life in jail. But why has the death of George Floyd become an annual event, it seems, here? Let's speak to Maurice McLeod, CEO of Race on the Agenda. Can you square this circle, Maurice? Good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian. Well, when you say square the circle, I think maybe you're slightly misunderstanding what I imagine Norwich are doing, which is not so much commemorating George Floyd, or of course that was the thing that sparked last year's global uprising. It's commemorating that demand for an end to structural racism. So it's not about this one awful killing, as you say. Hopefully Derek Chauvin's about to find some sort of justice for what he did. So it's not really about that. It's about what that death meant to the world, not just to America.
But that would be any time, any crime, anything, wouldn't it? I mean, you could always take any kind of, it seems to me this death was on the telly. We all saw it, and we can't change that. And it kind of livened us up in many respects to things that can go on. But ultimately, it was a crime of one man killing another. And that's it, really, isn't it? Terrible as it was.
Well, no.
It's not a race-related crime. There was no racial component to it. And yet, for some reason, that's become the narrative.
Yeah, okay. So what I think you're doing there is you can look at Derek Chauvin and go, bad apple. Yeah, all right, we need to fix that. It's what the protests were saying is that the barrel is bad, that the actual structure is bad. That's why it keeps happening. If Derek Chauvin was a one-off and George Floyd was a one-off, yeah, it wouldn't have garnered the public support that it had. It's because so many he was just symbolic of all the other.
Yes, he was. But I mean, since 2020, twice as many white people have been killed by police as black people. Now, I know there's a percentage issue there as well, but even so, it's not a good look all round. I mean, when it comes to what happens with the police and killing, whether it was seen as legitimate in the American legal rule book, as many of them seem to be, both black and white, or whether it was illegal in the case of Derek Chauvin, remains to be seen over the scale of all of those people. But more white people are killed by cops than black.
Yeah, and
so it's just not a black issue, is it? Really, people just make it up and pretend it is.
No, if you look at the percentage of people in America, it's not 50-50. So you're still more likely to be, as an individual black person, you're more likely to be killed by the police than as an individual white person.
Yes, but it's perilously close in some respects. And also, if you look at, as I mentioned from one of our black contributors who made the point, and I've made this point as well, that we need to look for other reasons here. If 54% of violent crimes are carried out by blacks in America, despite only making up 14%, then that does perhaps begin to explain why those people might come into contact more with the police. It's about availability sometimes, availability on the streets. And clearly the police come into contact with more blacks than whites in those areas, hence the numbers.
Well, I mean, there's so much evidence that police action in America in particular, but here as well, is targeted on areas that have large black populations. Now, you might say, what you're arguing is, because they do more crime, therefore that's why the police target those areas and look and picking up more people. But black people are the victims of those crimes.
Correct.
Most of that 54% that you just spoke about, black people are the victims, and they feel incredibly under-policed. When black people are often in America, when black people call the police, they end up becoming the victims, even if they call police to help them. So I don't think you can I don't think you can remove race from it. That's what millions of people all around the world realise that this is very much linked to race.
But what's interesting is that there literally is no evidence of that, and yet we've somehow created a global frenzy. And over there in Norwich, I don't know if you've ever been to Norwich, Maurice, but it's a fine old city, Norwich. But they're illuminated the city hall, big old light show for a crime that happened 4,000 miles away with no racial component, even though I know you want to think there is. And I mean, it's a head-scratching moment. This is perpetuating the problem, isn't it?
It's only, I'm sorry to say, and it's only head-scratching if you choose not to understand. As I said, it's not about commemorating a crime. It's about commemorating the battle to fight systemic racism.
But if it wasn't a racist crime, why would they be doing that? I mean, there might be many other crimes you could look at and say maybe that needs to be addressed. And why are we importing the problems there over here when we don't have that track record?
But that's your argument, which I disagree with, that it wasn't a racial crime. That doesn't mean Derek Chauvin went and killed him because he saw a black guy and wanted to do it. But the fact that he could kneel there looking at cameras quite nonchalantly, because he kind of knew
the nonchalance was almost his defence in a way. It's interesting that he never got to take the stand, because you'd have to be a particularly, stupid may be too much of a cheeky word to describe somebody who has killed somebody or murdered somebody in this respect. But, the fact that he was sitting there so nonchalantly probably would say to most lawyers he really didn't think he was doing anything wrong. I mean, there's a psychopathic nature to that.
Exactly the point. He didn't think, or he didn't think that what he was doing would be punished, because it never normally is. The reason there was such celebration when Chauvin was found guilty is that's really rare, ever for a police officer to be found guilty for killing a black person. So he kind of thought, you know what, I don't care.
Or a white person, for that matter. That's because they're not, according to the rule book, they're not usually guilty.
The only other person ever in that state to be accused, a police officer to be committed for killing a civilian, was when a black police officer killed a rich white woman some years ago. So yes, it's not surprising.
So you would support the fact that he went to jail, the black cop?
Of course, absolutely. Any police officer that
if it's an unlawful killing. I get. Listen, Maurice, we stopped there for no other reason than time, and I want to get a call in as well. Thank you, Maurice McLeod, CEO of Race on the Agenda. We did invite Norwich City Council onto the show, but due to their AGM meeting, bit busy over there. Nobody was available to come on and have a chat. Funny that. Barry is in Norwich. This is your local authority. Barry, how are you doing?
Hello, Ian. I'm really mad as hell, mate. I'm sitting in Norwich Cathedral Close at the moment. It's a beautiful city, and I think they've besmirched our city and the people who live in it. I'm not racist. I like to see justice done, but the reason they did this, Norwich has a high student population. The south of Norwich is a high student population. That's why Clive Lewis is in the House of Parliament, and they're targeting the Labour vote. And they're always contrary. If the people want one thing, the city council do another. You have to ask anyone who lives here who knows that. They're so distant and removed. We really do deserve better than what we've got.
I think it's almost exclusively Labour, isn't it, that seat? There's certainly no Tories there, I know that. Whether that would make any difference these days, I don't know.
Yeah, they're so contrary. You've cross-referenced that with the traffic. The traffic in Norwich is dreadful, run by a Labour council, what you were talking about earlier. They've completely ruined the city. Just contrary, I'm sure they do it just to wind up the indigenous population of Norwich. We really do deserve better than that. I want justice for anything that happens. If George Floyd was murdered, then he should go to prison.
Of course.
The person who done it. But you don't have to make a big virtue signalling.
And that is, you know what, that's precisely, this is almost dictionary definition of what that phrase means. Barry, thank you. And for those who listen to me regularly will know that I normally avoid that phrase because it's so overused that it often becomes a bit of a cliche, and then it becomes a parody, and you're up there with kind of political correctness gone mad. It's got that sort of feel to it. However, if you were to explain to a group of kids what virtue signalling is, you would say Norwich City Council decided to have a light show in commemoration of a bloke that died 4,000 miles away at the hands of a police officer. It has no relevance to race because it wasn't a racially motivated crime. It has no relevance to policing in this country. We don't quite know why they're doing it, other than the fact they're trying to belch out a racist thing. Because they put the whole Black Lives Matter thing, which comes with if you write Black Lives, it comes with an auto emoji on there as well. So they did all of that. and decided to play the same game that others had played, thus perpetrating yet again those issues of race, many of which do not exist in this country. That doesn't mean to say there's no problems or no racism. Only a fool would suggest otherwise. But to kind of import, yeah, we know what it's like because we're just over here, got the same deal. No, you haven't. Nobody has in this country. It's not Mississippi 1957 here in the UK. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Lines are open. You're listening to Ian Collins on Talk Radio, 1:30. Let's get the latest news headline.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV. I'm Emily Rose Adams. Here are your headlines. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, has described the diversion of a Ryanair passenger plane mid-air by a Belarus fighter jet as an outlandish action that will have serious implications. The plane was en route from Greece to Lithuania when Belarus claimed there was a security threat, scrambled a jet and forced the Ryanair flight to land in Belarus. Opposition activists says it was done to arrest a dissident journalist on board. A black equal rights activist is in a critical condition in hospital after being shot in the head in South London. 27-year-old Sasha Johnson was apparently injured at a party in Southwark on Sunday morning. Some patients in England are being told to wait until 2024 for a dentist appointment. Healthwatch England has published a report saying some surgeries have thousands of people on their waiting lists, with the pandemic adding to what have been historic problems in the sector. It found people are feeling pressured into paying for private care or even ending up in hospital after overdosing on painkillers. In the next stage of easing COVID restrictions in Northern Ireland, indoor hospitality venues are allowed to serve customers again from today, and 6 people from 2 households can meet inside. Meanwhile, Spain's allowing British tourists to return with no restrictions from today, although the UK government is still urging people not to go there as the country is on the amber travel list. The Culture Secretary has called on the BBC to place more emphasis on impartiality and diversity of opinion. Writing in The Times, Oliver Dowden has accused the broadcaster of adopting a "we know best" attitude. The BBC's working culture has been under increased scrutiny in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. And more than £1 million worth of artefacts have been stolen from Arundel Castle in West Sussex just a few days after reopening to the public. Rosary beads carried by Mary Queen of Scots at her execution in 1587 are among items taken. An Arundel Castle spokesman said the stolen items were of priceless historical importance. Those are your headlines on Talk Radio TV.
Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
Talk Radio. Ian Collins, weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
Cracking text from Julia Hartley-Brewer on the Eurovision. Did you see this? What she wrote. It was a fair point. The plan for next year, reference Eurovision Song Contest. The UK should put up Ed Sheeran and Adele singing a duet written with Chris Martin as our entry. Then bring on the Nul Point, you tone-deaf Euro... I can't even read the next bit. She's very salty. She's asterixed out the... well, 3 of the 4 letters. She's onto something there, though, isn't she? I mean, it would still be nil point. You just gotta know it. We're going to go back to your calls as well as to what the heck's going on in Norwich City Council. I mean, the fact that Clive Lewis, as our previous caller mentioned, is the MP there might give you a sort of a clue to, you know, he doesn't run the council, I get that, but the political mindset on the East Coast, as it were. Also this afternoon, the Home Secretary Priti Patel has promised the wholesale reform of the UK's broken immigration system as she unveiled plans for a fully digital border within 5 years.
The government is taking back control of immigration because there is such a thing as too much immigration and such a thing as too little immigration. And yes, the optimal level will be different at different times, and no, calculating it may not be an exact science. That does not mean we should conclude it is hopeless. The answer is to fix the system, to make it logical and fair.
She's promised to deliver a system that works for the law-abiding majority and against those who seek to abuse our hospitality and generous spirit. The Home Office said it would make the border more secure with automated checks to prevent foreign criminals travelling to the country while enabling the government to count who is coming in and who is going out. Let's speak to Tom Hunt, Conservative MP for Ipswich and member of the Common Sense Group. Tom, good afternoon to you. We've heard for years, it happens to be a Conservative Home Secretary at the moment, but we've heard for years, and you're probably ahead of the game on what I'm going to say here, very big noises and sounds coming out of the Home Office about what different Secretaries of State are going to do in this position. It never seems to happen. Why is this time any different?
I think it's the answer to that question is largely because I think we've had an immigration system that has become broken in many different respects. I think what we do have here, for the first time in a very long time, is a Home Secretary who is determined to change that. But I think the idea you're going to get the right person in the job and overnight the system's just going to be totally transformed.
Yeah.
I think that would be fanciful. It does take time to reform it and to change it. I welcome what we've heard today. I think counting in and out, I think there's been a problem with people coming here, staying for a short time and then staying here permanently on an illegal basis. I think this new system will make it much easier to track the behaviour of such people. But ultimately, I agree with you that we do need to see change and delivery, not just words. But I am also confident that the Home Secretary agrees with me and you on this, and that given half a chance, she will sort it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's things like the counting in, counting out. I mean, it's very hard, isn't it? If somebody is counted in, that's great. But if they then just leg it and disappear into the kind of grey economy, then there's not a lot we can do.
Well, whether it's in the case of somebody, say, coming here because of a holiday and then seeking to stay here permanently, or whether it's somebody coming over the channel in a rubber dinghy, I mean, they're slightly different issues, but they're similar in the sense that once you're in, you're in. And there's this perception that once you're in, you're in. So I think it's trying to challenge that, and the way we do that is through what the Home Secretary's announced today, and also what she's announced in terms of making it, stopping these kind of endless appeals. When we have economic migrants who come here claiming to be refugees, making these endless appeals, and us getting them onto the plane, and at the last minute them being dragged off it because they've got a final appeal, another appeal. But we've got to sort out what the Home Secretary discussed today. We've also, of course, got to sort out the situation to do with the illegal immigrants coming over from Guhale, which is understandably something that many of my constituents are completely fed up with.
Yeah.
And we've got to deal with it.
But isn't the practicality of that, though, Tom, that once people are here, that the time it takes to assess their situation is assessed, they're looked at, and that there's obviously a time component to all of that. All will claim that they have, a terrible, nefarious backstory that they're escaping from. And then, of course, as you say, that the legal game begins. So it's almost impossible to surmount that, isn't it?
If they've come over from France, which is a safe European country, they are not a refugee.
Agreed.
France is a safe country, and if they've come directly from France, then they are not a refugee because they've come from a safe country.
See, those lawyers you just mentioned, those I think Priti Patel called them not dodgy, but the troublemaking left-wing lawyers. That they will say, well, actually, you are entitled to come from wherever you want to. It's good luck if you get there.
Well, I think we've seen with things like the Brexit referendum that there is a majority of people in this country who do not think it should be a free-for-all. They do believe in borders. That is what they think. So I don't really care what these left-wing lawyers think. I also think these left-wing lawyers should reflect upon their action. And if they think that they're being moral, if they think they're being compassionate, my argument would be that they are doing the opposite. Because, of course, we do know that when it comes to those coming across illegally from France, that they are invariably young men in their 20s and 30s who can afford to fuel an evil trade in human lives. And they are, if a message goes out that it's worth trying, then what you're doing is you're fueling this evil trade, and you're also limiting our capacity to show compassion towards the most genuine of refugees who are most genuinely fleeing areas of conflict where they are at risk of persecution. So the moral thing, in my view, is to have strong borders, and it is to have a proper approach to this, and that must involve sending out a message that do not try and come over here illegally, because under no circumstances can you or will you stay. And that needs to be the strong message.
OK, on that point, Tom, thank you. Tom Hunt, Conservative MP for Ipswich. He's a member of the Common Sense Group over there. I didn't know such a group existed, by the way, the Common Sense Group. I'd quite like to join it myself. Rather interesting Christmas parties down there, I would imagine. Lots to continue to delve into at this end. I live in Norwich, says this one. Doesn't say who it's from. Oh, Wisteria. I'm disgusted this was done in Norwich. I don't want to pay my rates anymore for this. You cannot help but correlate Manchester and Lee Rigby with the date. They picked the anniversary of the Manchester bombings, the anniversary of the death of Lee Rigby, to have a light show on the side of City Hall to commemorate a bloke that died 4,000 miles away in a story that's nothing to do with us and didn't affect most Americans either. It wasn't a racist crime. It was a horrible crime. Wasn't a racist component to it. And for some reason, that sits better in the bellies, the little left-wing bellies of the councillors over there at Norwich, as they sit and go to bed at night preening their virtuous whiskers, thinking, job done, boys, done a great day's work there. Fantastic. I mean, Manchester's important. Yeah, we know that. Lee Rigby's important over there. But, this George Floyd thing, I mean, that's on the telly and everything, isn't it? So, that's the famous one. So that's the one we should be... And it's about race as well. It's about race. We're clearly on the side of all things good and great. Funny world, huh? 0344 499 1000. We'll go to your calls next.
Hello, I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers.
The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its analysis of new Home Office figures, which suggest just 1.6% of rape cases lead to a charge. The Telegraph leads with the headline Cancer Crisis Risks Replacing the Pandemic, as experts warn that 300,000 people have missed urgent checks in the last year due to the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, the Mail and the Express's front pages state that some NHS patients are being told to wait 3 years for a dentist appointment and are resorting to using DIY filling kits. Elsewhere, the Metro's front page celebrates the UK's record-breaking jab surge, which has seen a third of people fully vaccinated. And the Mirror leads with the headline 100,000 Brits off to Spain after the country lifted all measures for UK tourists from today. But the Home Secretary is warning people not to travel to amber list countries.
I'm Emily Rose Adams, and they're today's front pages on Talk Radio TV.
Kickstart your weekends with me, Kevin O'Sullivan, Saturday and Sunday on Talk Radio from 7 a.m. Great guests, forthright opinions, and lots of fun. Join me, Kevin O'Sullivan, on Talk Radio.
Book your Specsavers contact lens consultation online.
Whatever your tipple, Morrison's has got it sorted for your bank holiday weekend. With 1 litre bottles of Gordon's, Smirnoff Bells and Captain Morgan's for only $15.99 each. And packs of Carling, Stella and Strongbow for just $9.99 each. Morrison's. Majority of stores and online subject to availability. Stella, Strongbow, Carling and Spirits exclude Scotland and Wales. Beer 12 to 20 packs. Spirits ends 1st of June. Please drink responsibly.
Let's go, Peloton!
We know how good it feels to get off to a strong start. So we're offering £145 off accessories when you buy the Peloton Bike or Bike Plus.
Ready to ramp things up?
That's £145 off weights, resistance bands and much more.
Come on, yes!
Buy the Bike or Bike Plus before the 31st of May and start strong at onepeloton.co.uk. All access membership and internet connection required. One offer per order only. Terms apply.
Talk Radio. traffic and travel.
The M25 is looking slow, heading anti-clockwise between junction 26 at Waltham Abbey and 25 the A10. That's following an accident along that stretch. All lanes have just reopened. The M1 in Northamptonshire is slow moving, heading southbound between junction 15 and the Newport Pagnell services. A car has broken down there, so the inside lane's been closed. And the M42 in the West Midlands is slow moving on the northbound side at junction 6 of Coventry, and that's after a lorry broke down there. All lanes have reopened. I'm Emma Bussey.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
He's making out that only he can feel the pain.
Essential information and expert insight.
I think he could have made himself look a much more dynamic character by actually coming up with some different policies.
The Independent Republic of Mike Graham.
Weekday mornings from 10 on Talk Radio. Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
Thank you to Anonymous. If you haven't seen it, check out Avi Yemeni YouTube video about the shooting of Justine Diamond, which your race chap just mentioned, and why he mentioned she was a rich white woman would suggest he was suggesting the black officer who shot her was found guilty because she was rich and white. But the video sums up individuals or organisations jumping on this we are all racist agenda. Thank you for that. I haven't seen that, and I will check it out. Thank you to Gary as well, who says, thank you as a Mancunian. Ian Lee Rigby was also a Manchester lad, as well as the tragedy at the arena. Perhaps they should have shown the symbol of Manchester, the B, on Norwich's town hall. Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? It's just, I know it's, because they can't say, well, we're a different city. Yeah, you're not Minnesota either, for that matter. So that doesn't really wash. It's distressing, it's unfathomable, it's anti-intellectual, and it's nonsense. Don't go away, Leighton. Sarah's over here in Essex. How are you, Sarah?
Oh, hi, Ian. I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Right, firstly, I've never done this before. I'm not much of a talker, but I just happened to put your station on and heard the topic that you were making us aware of. And thank you for that. I feel that people like you need to make, us aware of what's going on, and I find it utterly appalling. And like you mentioned, there are other people, white people, that have been killed in very similar circumstances, and some of them even race circumstances.
Yeah, sure.
What are we doing?
Well, yeah, it seems to me that what organisations like Norwich City Council want to do is to carry on this narrative forever. And in doing that, it makes them feel good, and they've jumped on what they think is a trendy cause. Because it's very hard to say, when people say, well, should we highlight racism? You can't say no. The answer is, well, of course we should highlight racism, like we should highlight any terrible crime. Who doesn't agree with that? So it kind of becomes one of those things you're not meant to argue about, but we thought we'd give it a good go this afternoon.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've had a very good response.
Yeah, indeed.
Because what's happening, in my opinion, is all this race issues, half the time it isn't there. It's being created by media, politicians, and, people in higher courses. And it's causing an issue that really isn't there. And the other one thing I just want to say is that some of I don't know who said it, but somebody raised the issue of, about black crime. I think it was yourself in America, which, and you rightly said, people feel victimised because they're black, but, they are causing a lot of crime.
54% of all violent crimes are caused by mostly young black guys, making up just 14% of the population. Now, there's obviously something worth looking at there and saying, well, why is it that young kids of those ages and those backgrounds are going in? I'm perfectly relaxed about it. This isn't because somebody is born with black skin. There will be other factors going on there. I'm happy to examine them, but to suggest that this is all about the racist police is a nonsense.
Exactly. And, let's face it, the police have been rough with white boys, girls in England for many years. And there's never been such an outcry. And now, hopefully, they're amending their ways and doing things like they should be doing. And these things do happen sometimes. And yes, they've got to be addressed. And they are wrong.
I like it. Sarah, listen, go on. There was a but there. Go on.
Yes, and regarding crime, and some fellow was on there just a moment ago and said, it is black people that are targeted. Let's look at something. A lot of crime in London is black on black. It's race on the same races are attacking the same. They're in gangs and everything.
And again, to come back to the point that I made, and thank you, Sarah, for raising some of that. I don't run away from any of that, and I've made these points time and time again. That certainly when it comes to knife crime, gang-related crime, perpetrators black, young victims are black. And of course, absolutely. So there's an argument that says look at it as a health issue, which I think they did in Glasgow. I don't know if all cities are comparable to Glasgow or other parts of the world where they've tried this. I did a debate with Dawn Butler, a television thing the other day about exactly this. But what you mustn't do to detract from all of that is just simply try. See, it would be ridiculous. An extremist nutter would go, yeah, that's what black people do. No, that isn't what black people do. That is not what you do. This isn't happening because people are black. This is happening because black people in some groups and communities end up too regularly in the wrong place. You can look at the absent father argument, you can look at poverty, you can look at all of those things. What you mustn't do is throw all of this and go, that's all about the police, and it's a racist police. Because that doesn't take us anywhere. That just keeps it going, which is the whole point. That the reason they hated the Tony Sewell report was because the Sewell report attempted to say, can we look at this from another angle? Can we try and just angle this slightly differently so we can actually make some progress? We can make some progress because by banging on and wanging on day in and day out, just citing institutional racism for everything is not getting to the nub of the problem. It's not getting anywhere near the centre of the problem. It misses it spectacularly. It just provides a great excuse for lawyers and activists to continue to perpetuate their myths about this is all about race, it's all about disparities that are racially motivated, and it carries that argument on and never gets solved. And that's why the Sewell report was encouraging, and anyone with intelligence would look at that and read it and say, do you know what, this guy is bang on, that committee were bang on. But the idea that you point the finger to the police to try and solve all of it because it's a convenient excuse. Joe Biden, the creep Biden, comes out the hatches even before Chauvin was sentenced and starts throwing out the race card on this. So when the president is doing it, you know you're in trouble. Leighton is in South Wales. Leighton, how are you doing?
Hi, Ian. Thanks for taking the call.
That's a pleasure. Fire away.
I'm good, thank you. Bit of background on me. I'm a former Royal Marine and a former police officer. 30 years between the two of them.
Okay.
So I'm quite invested in this, as you can imagine. I was absolutely disgusted last week to see Norwich Council celebrating the Black Lives Matter movement and the death of George Floyd over Lee Rigby and the Manchester bombings.
Sure.
It's just utterly disgraceful.
On the very day as well. I mean, the interesting thing is as well, Leighton, that the death of George Floyd anniversary is actually tomorrow. So they could have done, if they were going to do it at all, which I question, tomorrow would have been the day, not on the day that happens to be the absolute anniversary of the Manchester bombings and the death of Lee Rigby.
Absolutely. If you want to mark something as a council, fair enough. But pick something that's relevant to the people. And I would argue
think so.
that Lee Rigby, serving under the colours of this country, and the kids and the adults with them in Manchester have got far more relevance to 99.99% of the population in this country.
Correct.
Than an appalling act. Don't get me wrong, I was a cop for 20 years as a police sergeant. I would have never have knelt on somebody's neck for that length of time. The danger was blind.
Absolutely. This was a bad guy. There's no doubt about it. This was a bad man, and he was, and that was evidenced by the fact that half his colleagues, as you saw, came out and gave evidence against him. Senior cops came out as well. They all thought he was a bad guy.
Indeed. And something that's not mentioned very much when in the papers, you've led me on to something again, something else. Something that's never mentioned in the papers when they're reporting on bad cops is, who do you think it is that locks up the bad cops and sends them to jail? Good cops, of which there are far more. I mean, by a massive percentage.
Every day of the week, and happy to leave it on that point. Leighton, thank you very much indeed for that. Somebody here says it's Thomas Sewell, not Tony Sewell. No. Thomas Sewell is a black writer that has written a lot on race. Tony Sewell is the educationalist who was the man that authored the race report recently for the government. So that's Tony Sewell. Thomas Sewell, by the way, who's also worth listening to, who writes some incredible against type kind of comments that upsets a lot of people. I'll tell you an interesting fact that that might be worth it. What's the racial breakdown in Norwich, I wonder, by the way? I mean, the way the council are talking, as if it's like Johannesburg over there. What's going on in like 1973 or something? What, have they got apartheid happening there? Is that why they're throwing out the lights on the city hall? To equal it up nicely, to make sure that nobody is thinking that this is the centre of all things bad and racist. I always thought Norwich was a rather nice place to be. Been to Norwich twice, once for a funeral and once for a TV job. Strange. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. We've got so many calls on this. What are Norwich thinking? What's their raison d'etre here? To align themselves fully with a case of a single citizen in Minnesota 4,000 miles away, as distinct from their own citizens in this country, the victims of Manchester and Lee Rigby too, that happened on the very day they decided to commemorate George Floyd. Interesting world we live in. 0344 499 1000.
I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers.
The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its analysis of new Home Office figures, which suggest just 1.6% of rape cases lead to a charge. The Telegraph leads with the headline Cancer Crisis Risks Replacing the Pandemic, as experts warn that 300,000 people have missed urgent checks in the last year due to the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, the Mail and the Express's front pages state that some NHS patients are being told to wait 3 years for a dentist appointment and are resorting to using DIY filling kits. Elsewhere, the Metro's front page celebrates the UK's record-breaking jab surge, which has seen a third of people fully vaccinated. And the Mirror leads with the headline 100,000 Brits off to Spain after the country lifted all measures for UK tourists from today. But the Home Secretary is warning people not to travel to amber list countries.
I'm Emily Rose Adams, and they're today's front pages on Talk Radio TV.
Kickstart your weekends with me, Kevin O'Sullivan, Saturday and Sunday on Talk Radio from 7 a.m. Great guests, forthright opinions, and lots of fun. Join me, Kevin O'Sullivan, on Talk Radio.
Talk Radio.
We did say, reference this last hour, that we tried to get somebody on from Norwich City Council, but they said they were unavailable due to their AGM and all the considerations. Wrong on that. One of them has come back to us. That's Leslie Graham, who's Green Party councillor for Norwich. She's going to be on with us on the other side of the news. So we'll be able to get a more definitive response as to the council's MO when it came to the light show and the timing of, etc. We'll also talk about NHS patients being told they'll have long waits, 3 years to see a dentist. 3 years to have your gnashers looked at. And UK animal rights group blockades McDonald's depots. What's going on there? Stand by for a heated discussion on that one too. 03444 499 1000. Let's get the news headlines at 2.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV. I'm Emily Rose Adams. Here are your headlines. The UK is coordinating with its allies after warning Belarus there'll be serious consequences from its diversion of a Ryanair passenger plane. Belarus state media claim there was a bomb threat, but Western nations believe the plane was forced to land in Belarus rather than Lithuania in order for the journalist Roman Protasevich to be arrested. The boss of Ryanair has accused Belarus of state-sponsored hijacking. A prominent Black Lives Matter activist is reportedly in a critical condition in hospital after being shot in South London. The Metropolitan Police is appealing for witnesses in relation to a shooting in Peckham in the early hours of Sunday, although the force is yet to confirm the identity of the woman injured. The Taking the Initiative Party, who Sasha Johnson was affiliated with, has released a statement on its Facebook page saying the 27-year-old had received a gunshot wound to her head. Some patients in England are being told they can't access a dentist appointment until 2024, according to a damning report from an industry watchdog. Health Watch England says surgeries report having thousands of people on waiting lists, with delays that existed at the start of 2020 made worse by the pandemic. Restrictions have come into force, banning people in Scotland from travelling to 3 areas of England where there have been outbreaks of the coronavirus variant first discovered in India. Bedford, Bolton and Blackburn and Darwin are the areas in question. Spain, meanwhile, has lifted its restrictions to allow people from Britain to travel there, although Spain remains on the UK's amber list, meaning only essential travel is advised. A leading business group is calling for 2021 to be a turning point for the UK's economy. The CBI says the country has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform its economy for the decade ahead, warning that a failure to make changes will result in continued low productivity and heightened social division. And it's hoped sniffer dogs, which can detect COVID-19, could soon be used at sporting events and in airports. A trial using samples donated by the public has returned a 94% accuracy rate. Those are your headlines on Talk Radio TV.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me weekdays from 4 with the biggest stories, the noisiest guests and my daily monologue, where I lay it out straight and don't pull my punches. And then it's over to you. So let's talk. You can hear me on DAB+, in-app and online, and watch me as we stream live on YouTube every weekday from 4 on the home of free speech, Talk Radio.
Hello, I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers.
The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its
444 1000. We're responding to a curious story. The local authority who decided this weekend to, well, perhaps ignore Manchester bombing victims and the anniversary of Lee Rigby. Instead, they wanted to focus on other matters.
In Minneapolis tonight, tensions are high as 4 police officers have been fired after a man was pinned to the ground and died. The incident was caught on camera, and we must warn you, the images are disturbing.
Yeah, we're aware of the story, a tragic story of the death of George Floyd, no doubt on that. Norwich Council held a purple and pink light show to commemorate the death of Mr. Floyd on Saturday. How did they arrive at that decision? Earlier, I spoke to the CEO of Race on the Agenda. He's Maurice McLeod, who said the council's decision to light up City Hall should be self-evident.
It's only head-scratching if you choose not to understand. As I said, it's not about commemorating a crime, it's about commemorating the battle to fight systemic racism.
We'll talk to one of the councillors from Norwich in a few moments' time. Also this afternoon,
millions of us are risking the health of our teeth by failing to give them the care and attention they deserve. Visit your dentist regularly so that any problems can be identified and sorted quickly. A healthy smile means a healthy life.
Yeah, it's all very well, but you can't even get an appointment at the dentist. We couldn't get an appointment for my 2 kids this week. Could not get an NHS We're now on a list of 2 other dentists. So we had to pay to take a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old to the dentist. 40 quid a pop. There it is. Welcome to the new world. COVID strikes again. Some people waiting 3 years. 3 years to see a dentist. I mean, your teeth could fall out in that time, couldn't they? Music, all to come. 0344 499 1000.
Ian Collins, weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
So let's go straight back to that story. Norwich City Council lighting up one of the city's most recognisable landmarks to mark the first anniversary of the death of George Floyd. The City Hall was lit yellow, pink and turquoise in remembrance of his death and all black lives lost in the aftermath. Mr. Floyd died, of course, in Minneapolis last year. Derek Chauvin, the police officer, knelt on his neck. He was found guilty of murder. He's likely to be spending the rest of his life in jail. He'll be sentenced in June. Why has the death of George Floyd become an event in this way? Leslie Graham is Green Councillor for Thorpe Hamlet in Norwich City Council, who was one of those who asked for City Hall to be lit up for this anniversary. Good afternoon to you, Leslie.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure,
May
and
I
thank
say
you.
first that there are many tragedies which deserve to be commemorated. And if there's one that you're particularly concerned about, I would encourage you to talk to your council and light up City Hall.
Yeah.
And there's a good chance that they'll say yes. You
That's
don't have
good.
to be a councillor to do
that's
that.
nice.
The council is there for you. So it's
That is
about
nice.
who we're commemorating.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
no,
about-
that's lovely to hear that, and it's always worth, you know,
No.
penning a little note to your council. Some might say, however, that some things are kind of self-evident, really. That, you know, if you've got the anniversary of Manchester, the anniversary of Lee Rigby, the last thing you'd want to do on that very day would have a commemoration to a citizen who died 4,000 miles away in Minneapolis at the hands of a madman.
It's not either or. Nobody should die at the
But
hands
there's a
of a
priority,
madman.
isn't there?
You
You'd think
have
as
a
a
young
council.
woman in hospital fighting for her life
Yes.
after being attacked, and we don't know who by. But already the police are saying it probably wasn't a racist attack. Well, maybe it wasn't, but isn't that a line of investigation that they should be taking
Yes,
seriously?
indeed, and maybe they have information to make that initial statement. I don't know. I mean, I think to bring it back to what you guys did in Norwich, I think some people might think, well, what would be the reason you would arrive at a story from another country and a citizen from another, terrible as it was, global as it was? What would be your reasons for focusing on that above some pretty obvious areas that domestically would perhaps be more helpful or relevant to both people in Norwich and beyond?
Well, sadly, George Floyd is not alone in having been murdered by the police. What makes him unique or almost unique is having been filmed being murdered. And so my thoughts go out to everyone who's been bereaved and who is grieving. But another thing that died on that day is the ability of people not affected by racism to imagine that to deny the systemic racism that allows such events to happen.
What's racism got to
So,
do with it?
like,
This was
imagine-
nothing to do with racism, Leslie.
Sorry, George Floyd's murder was everything to do with racism.
No, it wasn't. There was no racist component to it at all.
I would dispute that. In whose world is it okay to, to treat anybody like that?
Well, it's not
Of
okay to
whatever
treat
colour.
anybody, but the issue is whether there was a racist element. If you look at the court papers and follow the case, there was no. This wasn't a racist murder; it was a murder. There wasn't a racist element to it whatsoever. There was no accusation of it or no suggestion of it.
You ask any
You didn't know that,
family
did you?
where kids. You ask any family where kids are taught to keep their heads down and avoid trouble from the police.
Yes.
Any family where they're frightened to call the police when they're in danger.
Sorry, what's the point?
My point is that black people don't get the protection they deserve from the police in America, and we need
Right.
to look at whether or not that is the case
Well,
here.
I mean, we have,
Many
but,
people-
but you're perpetrating that, aren't you? You're importing a story that never actually happened from America. You're not alone, by the way. It's not you. The American president joined in with this hysteria as well by pretending it was a racially motivated crime when it absolutely wasn't. But of course, there are other people. 500 white people have died since 2020 at the hands of the police in America. Twice the number of blacks that have died. Now, I know there's a percentage difference in terms of population. There's also a criminal difference in that same percentage as well. I mean, do we look and, are we going to have a day in Norwich for Tony Timper? I doubt you even know who Tony Timper is.
Would you like to tell me?
He's a white guy that died under almost the same circumstances as George Floyd. In 2016 in Dallas, he could hardly breathe, he said. 30 times he called out for his life before he took his last breath. Nobody lit up a town hall in Norwich for him.
Well, maybe they should have done. If somebody asks us to do that, then we should consider it.
But it doesn't remove the confusion, and we've had some of your constituents on with us this afternoon, Leslie, and, I'm sure you're a nice person. I'm sure so are your colleagues over there at Norwich Council, but it's just a sense that, was this the right cause? What's your reason for doing it? And there's a sense this was all about kind of patting yourself on the back a bit, getting involved in something. Racism seems a bit cool. This thing was on the telly quite a lot. That's the one to get involved with, rather than Manchester or Lee Rigby.
There is nothing cool about racism.
No, the cause, the virtuous cause of advancing something that would make you feel better about doing it.
Well, the degree of racism has been exposed by the George Floyd case.
What's the racism like in Norwich? What's the figures looking like over there? Because looking at your town hall, I'm beginning to think it's like Johannesburg a couple of decades back, but the figures don't seem to bear that out, Leslie.
I think you would have to ask the people who have direct experience of racism, and I don't feel qualified to answer that
Okay,
one.
all right, that's fair enough. But do you understand why some people might be confused that you picked this cause above others? I mean, this was a straight case of a very bad, psychopathic even, police officer who did bad, killing a citizen. The citizen died, the police officer is going to jail.
And he almost got away with it, and might have done had there not been the outcry that there was.
Well, that doesn't mean he was going to get away with it, does it? I mean, some people do, some people don't. We will never know that. But he didn't get away with it. He's going to jail for the rest of his days.
And so he should.
And his colleagues spoke out against him in court. The very people that I would have imagined, Leslie, would argue are also in it up to their neck when it comes to this kind of thing. They all spoke out against him, not for him.
And so they should. But he came close to not getting prosecuted. And I would say that one of the reasons that he did get prosecuted was because of the outcry at what they witnessed and filmed. It can no longer be denied because it was filmed.
Well, indeed, but I mean, that goes for any crime, doesn't it? I mean, that's not exclusive to this. I mean, it was filmed, and therefore that formed the most fantastic evidence in a prosecution against him. But nobody is disputing that. My point is that it's lots of people are killed at the hands of a mad person or a person with murderous intent every day around the world. Why did you pick this one particular crime, nowhere near Norwich, to highlight and go to the extent of lighting up an entire town hall? I mean, it's quite a bit of choreography you had going on there with your light show.
Apologies.
That's all right. I tell you what, we'll
The
leave it.
point is, this murder awoke a disgust that was latent and that needs to be there.
Yeah, I don't think people would say it was
when somebody
latent.
is murdered by the people who are charged with protecting them.
Yes, yeah, and that's what happened. The rule of law presided and was able to send a man to jail for the wrongdoing of killing a citizen, an innocent man. Leslie, thank you for that. That's Leslie Graham, who's the Green Councillor for Thorpe Hamlet. That's in Norwich, part of Norwich City Council. You heard her response there. Are you any more enlightened now you've heard the councillor speak? Can I talk on your behalf? Of course you're not. 0344 499 1000. Back to your calls on Talk Radio in a few moments. In fact, Peter's over here in Oxfordshire on this very point. Peter, how are you doing?
Morning, Ian.
Hello.
Afternoon, I should say. And last time I spoke to you, I qualified for a Perrier Award.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, not because of the brilliant points I made about the Scottish economy, but because I had a frog in my throat.
Oh, right. Yes, it was the sound effect of the week you got, as I remember.
Absolutely.
There you
absolutely. Ian, I've just listened to that lady from Norwich, and I have to say, you know why so many people hold local government in such contempt. Because of the way in which they perform to virtue signal. I remember when I lived in London, my London Borough Authority had signs up saying, "We are not a nuclear-free zone." You know, they just love to parade their views in
absolutely.
public.
And she didn't...
Just parading their views.
She didn't even seem to know that this was not a racially motivated... She actually didn't know that fact.
No,
and that... So the idea that she had to be informed of that on national radio is a bit grim, isn't it? When
Absolutely.
You're one of the people behind the campaign to light up your own town hall.
Point I was going to make, Ian, is, of course, that there is a remedy against these people.
Yeah.
It's not very often that people pursue it, but, of course, you can report these matters to the district auditor and say that this is expenditure that has not been properly incurred. And the district auditor can, of course, in appropriate circumstances, surcharge the councillors concerned.
Good point.
In fact,
So maybe I need to put my... Yeah. Do you have to be a council taxpayer in that area?
Yeah, I mean, in the 1980s, lots of London boroughs, because led by Livingston, decided to ban advertising in the Times Education Supplement. And that was held by the High Court to be unlawful.
Right, yeah. I can see the decision making.
My local authority, because they put the rates up 62% in the year in question, and they incurred about 600,000 of unnecessary expenditure by advertising in the Guardian rather than in the Times Education Supplement.
Where it would have been cheaper. Peter, I love it. Thank you. You pointed out a number of things. There's some great inconsistencies and money wasting of local authorities as well. That's an absolute peach, that, isn't it? We wouldn't advertise in the Times Education Supplement, which is kind of the go-to place, but we'll go for the Guardian even though it's more expensive. Yeah, that classic case. You can see the thinking. We're not putting our adverts there. We'll put them in the Guardian instead. Yeah, you want to investigate that business model if that's your concern? 0344 499 1000. Lots of people simply saying, I'm glad I don't live in Norwich. Isn't that interesting? Because I don't want to make this a downer on Norwich, because Norwich is a fine old place. Used to have a fine football club there back in the day. Remember Delia Smith and all that went on with the mighty Canaries over there? What's the state of play with Norwich, Ryan, these days? Are they still kicking a ball? They got promoted. There you go. So they're back again. Oh, by the way, thank you for a cracking weekend. Commiserations to Leicester. Isn't that sad? Finishing 5th like that. Tears all round in our house. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to Ian Collins on Talk Radio. It's 2:20.
Hello, I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers.
The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its analysis of new Home Office figures, which suggest just 1.6% of rape cases lead to a charge. The Telegraph leads with the headline Cancer Crisis Risks Replacing the Pandemic, as experts warn that 300,000 people have missed urgent checks in the last year due to the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, the Mail and the Express's front pages state that some NHS patients are being told to wait 3 years for a dentist appointment and are resorting to using DIY filling kits. Elsewhere, the Metro's front page celebrates the UK's record-breaking jab surge, which has seen a third of people fully vaccinated. And the Mirror leads leads with the headline 100,000 Brits off to Spain after the country lifted all measures for UK tourists from today. But the Home Secretary is warning people not to travel to amber list countries.
I'm Emily Rose Adams, and they're today's front pages on Talk Radio TV.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me weekdays from 4 with the biggest stories, the noisiest guests, and my daily monologue, where I lay it out straight and don't pull my punches. And then it's over to you. So let's talk. You can hear me on DAB+, in-app and online, and watch me as we stream live on YouTube every weekday from 4 on the home of free speech, Talk Radio.
Must be 3. Run your business without running out of data. Get 3's unlimited data plan for just £14.17 a month. That's 30% cheaper than the other big networks. Search 3 Business.
30% cheaper than EE, Vodafone and O2 based on equivalent 24-month plans. Price excludes 20% VAT. See 3.co.uk/terms/business. T's and C's apply.
Talk Radio. Traffic and travel.
In Lancashire, the M65 westbound, you've got a lane blocked by a broken down lorry between junction 6 at Blackburn and junction 5 for Shadsworth. The inside lane is blocked there. In Somerset at Stoke-sub-Hamden, the A303, that's still shut eastbound after a lorry overturned earlier. Closed from the Cartgate roundabout along to the Ilchester turn off the A37. The lorry's been recovered and they're just clearing up, but to expect queues there eastbound on the A303. I'm Adam Moore.
Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
What an astonishing afternoon so far, of course. Martin says the Green councillor is amazing, amazingly useless, like every Green councillor I've heard speak. His words, not mine. When they polled the black communities in America, they want more policing, not less. She's talking absolute rubbish that blacks are scared to call the police. It's extraordinary. She had a set of almost desired lines. I want to believe that. I want to believe the absolute problem, the core of the problem of this kind of thinking is thus. You set out your stall of what you think politically, then you find all the little elements that fit that, and then you just quote incessantly those particular lines at any argument, even though they haven't been analysed or proven or nor are you necessarily qualified to use. It's extraordinary times. Let's just move on. We are going to come back to you. We've got some cracking calls on this, and I want to continue to gauge your views, particularly if you live in Norwich, which I think just makes it even more interesting on this story. But also, there's patients are facing a 3-year wait for an NHS dentist appointment. 3 years. Some who struggled to get appointments during the COVID pandemic are now being told to go private. A damning report into the state of dentistry warns that patients are increasingly being removed from practice lists for not making an appointment sooner. The review of over 1,000 cases found some people have been asked to wait 3 years for an NHS dental appointment, but told they could have a private slot within a week. Dr. Ben Atkins is a dentist and trustee of the Oral Health Foundation. Ben, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Very well. Nice to have you with us. It's never been easy to get a dentist of late, but now it seems impossible for many. What's gone wrong here?
I think there's a tragic failure of the current system. It was historically under a lot of pressure, and COVID hasn't been helpful.
Indeed, it hasn't. I guess that's, clearly set the backlog up into, the levels that it currently is. But I mean, even prior to that, I think reasonable to say lots of people, I often did phone in some people saying, I can't get an NHS dentist anymore. Is that because more dentists are going private? Is it because there's only a certain amount you can have on a list? Has the government changed something here? What's happened over the years?
I mean, I've been a dentist, NHS dentist for 20 years. Now, the government has been trialling a new contract for the past 10 or 15 years. One of my practices was a pilot site for those, but it seems to have gone quiet. It just seems to have dropped it. I personally put a lot of effort in. My team ridiculously grew our list, really invested into this, and it was really successful. And it just seems to be just died a death and gone really quiet. That's made a massive impact into the state of our patients' oral health. We've made such a big inroads into that. And there's other underlying things like Brexit. A lot of dentists have gone back to Europe, they haven't been influxing in. And that transition, obviously, COVID's aside, has been a real transition. And there's lots of other things within that. So just having 3 million people waiting to get a dental appointment. Now that isn't going to be good for the nation's oral health. So what we've got to do is really concentrate on the prevention of disease, brushing your teeth twice a day with a fluoride toothpaste, things that you can control as a patient yourself. Understanding your mouth is dramatically different. And it's National Smile Month at the moment. So there's lots of things now about that. Yeah, so it times very nicely to this report that educating people on the preventative journey that they can take to stop needing to go to the dentist as frequently.
So is that going to have to be, Ben, the kind of short-term answer while people wait to get somewhere to have their teeth looked at?
I think it's critical that you have that relationship with your dental practice, because as a dentist, the dentists have worked phenomenally hard in this COVID world. We've had to put in, like everybody else, but the really important thing is to contact your dental practice, because they are prioritizing their patients. They're getting their patients in who really need to see the dentist. Some of my patients, we only saw every 2 years because they had really good oral health. But some patients, I'd like to brush their teeth for them. So it's communicating to that dental practice when should I be coming in, and having that conversation. The practices are open. Yeah. They are not working so hard on this. And this report highlights the government needs to support those practices in getting back into the full swing of the 100% contract accessibility.
Here's a question then. Let's just very quickly, before we go, Ben, look at some preventative ways of looking after our teeth. Electric toothbrush or non-electric?
Personally, I love electric toothbrushes. The research shows that if you use a manual toothbrush correctly and electric toothbrush, there is no difference. None of my patients use the manual toothbrush perfectly well. So I love an electric toothbrush, makes such a difference in my mouth. Yeah,
I do the electric. Then I've got one of those kind of like little thin ones, and I go round manually afterwards. Is that?
Yeah. Do you know what? That's brilliant, because what you're doing there is brushing in between your teeth. So what we advise our patients, brush your teeth as you would do twice a day with fluoride toothpaste, but once a day, think how you're going to brush between your teeth.
Yeah, so that's the thinking.
Blocks, little brushes, and really concentrate on that. Personally, I do it when I've got time to do it, not when I'm chasing my little angels to go off to school in the morning.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Mouthwash or no mouthwash?
Mouthwash depends. Speak to your dentist if you need to. For me, a mouthwash is designed to be at another time if you've got a high need. So I would add that into your lunchtime, especially after this COVID period. If you're worried about your teeth and you've had a lot of stress and things, and you want a little bit extra fluoride into your diet, whack it in at lunchtime makes a big difference. But also another big tip is don't rinse with water after brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
You could use a mouthwash for that, but just spit, don't rinse, because what you're doing there is rinsing out all the fluoride. You just spent 2 minutes putting around all your teeth, and it can make a massive difference to the decay rate.
Family bar of fruit and nut or family packet of Maltesers? Which one's best for your teeth?
Oh, I don't think we should be having either of those. But if you are going to have sweets and things, keep them to a mealtime, because then you're controlling that sugar intake. And understanding not having a dribs and drabs all the way through the day. I was unfortunately one of those children that grew up with a sweet every so often. I was a good boy, and that's why I had the holes in fillings in my teeth. Yep. I went to an NHS dentist, and I was probably that patient, whereas my brother, little angel, eat all his sweets at once, hasn't had a filling in his life. Same house, but it's that strategy. It makes such a difference.
We have that very scenario in our family too. Ben, lovely to have you on, sir. Thank you. Dr. Ben Atkins, he's dentist and trustee of the Oral Health Foundation as well. So, there's going to be the option. You either go private if you're in a massive queue, and if you can't get any of that, just try and prevent your teeth going bad by looking after them more. Who'd have thought it? That's where we're at. It was never a controversy a load of years ago, was it? You'd go and see a dentist. Nobody thought of a private dentist. Now, as an adult, you can't get anything but a private dentist. I haven't been with an NHS dentist for years. I wouldn't be able to get one. That wouldn't even be on the agenda. I don't go that often, but I don't, when I say I don't go that often, I don't need to go that often, but other than your kind of regular checkups and stuff. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. You're listening to Ian Collins on Talk Radio. Let's get the latest news headlines at 2:30.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV. I'm Emily Rose Adams. Here are your headlines. The UK is coordinating with its allies after warning Belarus there'll be serious consequences from its diversion of a Ryanair passenger plane. Belarus state media claim there was a bomb threat, but Western nations believe the plane was forced to land in Belarus rather than Lithuania in order for the journalist Roman Protasevich to be arrested. The boss of Ryanair has accused Belarus of state-sponsored hijacking. A prominent Black Lives Matter activist is reportedly in a critical condition in hospital after being shot in South London. The Metropolitan Police is appealing for witnesses in relation to a shooting in Peckham in the early hours of Sunday, although the force is yet to confirm the identity of the woman injured. The Taking the Initiative party, who Sasha Johnson was affiliated with, has released a statement on its Facebook page saying the 27-year-old had received a gunshot wound to her head. Some patients in England are being told they can't access a dentist appointment until 2024, according to a damning report from an industry watchdog. Health Watch England says surgeries report having thousands of people on waiting lists, with delays that existed at the start of 2020 made worse by the pandemic. Restrictions have come into force, banning people in Scotland from travelling to 3 areas of England where there have been outbreaks of the coronavirus variant first discovered in India. Bedford, Bolton and Blackburn and Darwin are the areas in question. Spain, meanwhile, has lifted its restrictions to allow people from Britain to travel there, although Spain remains on the UK's amber list, meaning only essential travel is advised. A leading business group is calling for 2021 to be a turning point for the UK's economy.
And a quick look at the weather. Sunny spells but more showers for most of the UK this afternoon, and feeling cold in the north and east of Scotland.
Across the UK, early breakfast with James Max on Talk Radio.
Join me every weekday morning from 5 a.m. I'll bring you all the big news stories of the day. And I also want to hear what you have to say. So join me bright and early, live from 5.
Early breakfast with James Max. Weekday mornings from 5 on Talk Radio. Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
It is Talk Radio. So much comment on this. I knew when I saw this story, I thought there's so much to delve into here, because it's not just about Norwich Council and what they decided to do on the side of their building with the light show for George Floyd, but it taps into a kind of a sort of a temperature or how politicians get things so spectacularly wrong while simultaneously believing they've got everything so spectacularly right, playing to a kind of very narrow parochial gallery and set of opinions. Somebody says, I live in Norwich, I'm happy the town hall was lit up. I don't believe you live in Norwich anyway, but why would it be a racist issue to question the fact that they've done this, bearing in mind it's not even a racist crime we're talking about? And that's the kind of world we're in, isn't it? What a terrible indictment of British discourse when somebody sends you that in to suggest that your only reason for debating it is because of you actually want to commemorate victims of Manchester, like an 8-year-old girl who was killed, Lee Rigby, who was beheaded in broad daylight. You might want to commemorate those people on that very day. No, don't think about that. Just go straight for the R card. Curious times. And also this. It's another interesting one. Animal rights protesters blockaded 4 McDonald's distribution centres over the weekend to stop deliveries to the fast food chain's 1,300 outlets. Animal Rebellion used trucks and bamboo structures to stop lorries leaving depots in Hemel Hempstead, Basingstoke, Coventry and Hayward, Greater Manchester. The group is targeting McDonald's for its role in the climate emergency. Animal Rebellion want McDonald's to commit to becoming fully plant-based by 2025. Hang on, that's 3.5 years' time, isn't it? I mean, I'm no businessman, but that's quite tight, I would imagine. Should we go meat-free then? Let's speak with Tim Thorpe, Campaigns and Policy Officer at the Vegan Society, and Glenn Burrows, co-founder of The Ethical Butcher. Tim, firstly, good afternoon to you. I mean, it's quite I get your philosophy and understand where you're coming from, but you haven't given them much time.
Well, it's worth pointing out that we're not Animal Rebellion, so I'm from the Vegan Society.
Sorry, yes, you are indeed.
Not something that we've been involved in. I think you're right in probably what you're saying, that's a very tight time frame to make that transition happen. But what they have got right is the importance of making that transition and making it as soon as possible for the environment and for the climate.
Do we have to give up all meat?
From our point of view, yes. I mean, there's an ethical point there as well, and that's that it's fundamentally not necessary for human wealth and human health and well-being, and therefore breeding and raising and slaughtering animals for food is unethical for that reason. We don't need to do it, and it doesn't respect the rights of those animals.
Okay, well, it doesn't have to be unethical. We've got an ethical butcher here, Glenn Burrows. Good afternoon, Glenn. I mean, how do you respond to that on the wider issue then? That it's unethical is that the Vegan Society's claim, and Animal Rebellion would echo that as well, and as would others who give up meat. Is it becoming increasingly difficult to defend the ethical nature of meat eating?
Well, I think there's so many nuances and there's so much variety in how meat is produced that I think factory farming and should be stopped completely. I think it has no place in our world. But the point is that we can produce meat in a way that allows a lot of other life to live through regenerative systems, and animals are really important for restoring soil health. So I think agriculture without animals entirely isn't really feasible.
Tim, I mean, you heard it there from Glenn. It's not really feasible. So it might be, I get it on your agenda, ideal, but not feasible. How do you respond to that?
Well, I don't think that's what the evidence suggests. I can see what Glenn's saying, that there are types of farming with animals that are more or less sustainable than others. The fundamental point, though, is that the vast amounts and the vast quantities of animal products that we consume, they simply can't be, that demand simply can't be met by the methods that Glenn kind of is talking about there and is hinting towards. So, even if we accepted that, which we don't, is an ethical approach, it would require vastly less consumption of animal products. And that's what vegans across the UK are helping to contribute towards. On top of that, there are farmers who are producing organic vegetables, for example, in the UK, really productive, diverse systems, providing high quality food and nutrition without the use of any animals or animal products. So I just don't think it's accurate to say that they're essential processes.
Be quite difficult though, wouldn't it, Glenn, to have a butcher's shop with no meat?
You're talking about the difference between organic and veganic here. So from what I understand, there is a veganic system of farming where all the nutrition is applied back to the land by basically composting and fermenting any waste vegetable matter. But from what I understand, this hasn't been proven on a large scale. It works on very small kind of 5-acre veg box schemes, but I'm not aware of any system where it can produce the kind of huge areas of monocrop grains and vegetables that we're eating at the moment. What I advocate for actually is an end to chemical farming, because chemical monocropping, which is producing grain-based food, is more damaging to the environment, I would argue, than beef farming. What we need is to integrate animals into rotational systems to restore the soil health after we've removed it by growing vegetables and grains.
So you would be in favour of less meat in the diet across the national landscape? You haven't got a problem with reduction, but just not eradication.
Well, I think a lot. Yeah, people vary on what kind of diets they do well on. Some people seem to do well on a more carbohydrate heavy diet, and other people seem to do well on a higher fat and protein diet. I don't think we do need to reduce the amount of meat that we eat. I think we need to put the animals back into rotations with crops to restore soil health so that we can get away from this dependence on chemicals. Because as I understand it, if people stop eating meat and we need to eat more grains and vegetables to survive, the only way of doing that is by throwing more chemicals on the land, and then we're running into another cul-de-sac of environmental disaster.
Tim, could it be out of the frying pan into the fire then, Tim? If you had your dream of a meatless world, you might be polluting something else in doing so.
I don't think so, and we've got a huge amount of scientific evidence to support this discussion. So we're not talking in a vacuum here. Like there's for example, some research from the University of Oxford that's the most comprehensive meta-analysis that looked at food systems right across the world, and that determined that moving from our current diets to ones that exclude animal products could reduce our land use by 76%, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by around a half, and crucially, to what Glenn was saying, reduce our dependence on pesticides and fertilizers, because a vast majority, or a significant proportion, I should say, of the arable crops, these monocultures that Glenn's talking about, are currently grown to feed to animals, and that's what produces the vast majority of our animal products. So I'd like to know what Glenn doesn't seem to think that we need a reduction in animal products in order to move to these sorts of systems. But the fact is they're significantly less productive, and most of our current animal products, they come from factory farms, and even where they don't, in grazing systems, for example. The evidence suggests that they are still net emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. So over a long period of time, even a organic grazing system, it produces more greenhouse gases than it can sequester. And it's
Glenn, can you just come back on some of that?
Yeah, you've thrown a lot of things out there, so I'm going to try and deal with them one by one. First of all, you claim that most of the crops grown are to produce animal feed, and this is simply not true. Animals eat the byproducts of processing those crops for human uses. It's an incredibly small percentage of crops that are actually human grade that we feed to animals. I think it's like 3 or 4%. Animals
why would we feed human grain to animals, though? They're grown on agricultural land that could be used to grow
but animals,
human
they're
food.
not fed. They're not grown. Animals eat things like seed oils after they've been pressed to make oils. They eat things like spent brewer's grains. There isn't a huge grazing animals, and in my opinion as well, grazing animals should eat what they're designed to eat, which is pasture. And we've got. You claim that 76% of land is used for grazing animals. Well, this is true, but only because it's not suitable for growing crops. And this is especially true in the UK.
60% in the UK is used for grazing animals. And yes, you're right to say that much of that is not suitable for growing crops. But the fact is that if we had plant-based diets, we wouldn't need that land to be agricultural land. And that would be a much better way to sequester carbon, to enable habitats to recover, is actually not using it as farmland, but actually restoring it to woodland, restoring it to peatland, or using it for other uses like commercial forestry, sustainable wood products. The suggestion
so much more pressure on the agricultural land that we do have. If we stopped eating all the calories from animal foods, we'd have a huge amount more pressure on the agricultural land that we do have, which would mean more chemicals would need to be used to grow that crops. The thing is about this marginal land,
that isn't true. That's not what the research suggests. There's meta-analysis after meta-analysis published that you can go and look at. People can go and look for themselves. The University of Oxford study is the most famous one, the 2018 meta-analysis, but it's been repeated multiple times. I didn't suggest that 76% of our cropland is used to grow animal food. It's actually it's probably around 40% globally. But in the UK, we use about 60% of the habitable land in the UK for grazing animals. Now, how could we possibly use more than that and transition all the animal products that we produce, or the animals that we use in factory farms, also onto grazed land?
And Tim, can I just put a point to you? A few of our listeners have made this point. Just a final quick response, if you can. You're advocating putting thousands, maybe millions of farmers all over the world out of business. Get a grip, says Paul.
There are other land-based industries and economies, and it's about changing the way we do things. So we would not advocate we advocate for making this change via support, so via state support.
But you'd be putting Glenn out of business as well. Poor old Glenn won't know what to do with himself. Glenn, when your butcher shop is all empty and dormant and there's no piggies hanging up.
Well, one of the fastest growing parts of the food sector at the moment is the vegan sector. We've got businesses.
It's not that fast though, is it? Glenn, could you become the vegan butcher, do you think, Glenn?
Well, I spent 25 years not eating meat, and my health suffered as a result. And there is, having done a degree in food science, I actually, the reason I didn't eat meat for such a long time was a very severe objection to factory farming, which I still stand against. But
okay.
I think the important thing, and the point where I would like to find a bit more kind of common ground with the vegan society is that it's not one food is bad and one food is good. We need to look at the way that we grow and produce all foods to minimize the impact.
Okay, so we need a more intelligent way of eating, really, and maybe that will be the answer. Listen, Glenn, thank you. Glenn Burrows is the co-founder of The Ethical Butcher. Tim Thorpe, Campaigns and Policy Officer at the Vegan Society, with us here on Talk Radio. Over to you on this 10344 499 1000. If you were the world's biggest meat eater and gave it all up and became a vegan, I'm all ears at this end. I enjoyed a lovely rack of ribs yesterday afternoon. This came out, a right old bloater of a pig must have been carrying these ribs around with it. I don't know how long ago, couple of days, couple of months, no idea at all, but it tasted gorgeous. And we got to get rid of that. If you did, how did it work? How are the carrots going? 0344 499 1000. Back to your calls next.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV. I'm Emily Rose Adams. Here are your headlines. The UK is coordinating with its allies after warning Belarus there'll be serious consequences from its diversion of a Ryanair passenger plane. Belarus state media claim there was a bomb threat, but Western nations believe the plane was forced to land in Belarus rather than Lithuania in order for the journalist Roman Protasevich to be arrested. The boss of Ryanair has accused Belarus of state-sponsored hijacking. A prominent Black Lives Matter activist is reportedly in a critical condition in hospital after being shot in South London. The Metropolitan Police is appealing for witnesses in relation to a shooting in Peckham in the early hours of Sunday, although the force is yet to confirm the identity of the woman injured. The Taking the Initiative party, who Sasha Johnson was affiliated with, has released a statement on its Facebook page saying the 27-year-old had received a gunshot wound to her head. Some patients in England are being told they can't access a dentist appointment until 2024, according to a damning report from an industry watchdog. Health Watch England says surgeries report having thousands of people on waiting lists, with delays that existed at the start of 2020 made worse by the pandemic. Restrictions have come into force, banning people in Scotland from travelling to 3 areas of England where there have been outbreaks of the coronavirus variant first discovered in India. Bedford, Bolton and Blackburn and Darwin are the areas in question. Spain, meanwhile, has lifted its restrictions to allow people from Britain to travel there, although Spain remains on the UK's amber list, meaning only essential travel is advised. A leading business group is calling for 2021 to be a turning point for the UK's economy. The CBI says the country has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform its economy for the decade ahead, warning that a failure to make changes will result in continued low productivity and heightened social division. And it's hoped sniffer dogs, which can detect COVID-19, could soon be used at sporting events and in airports. A trial using samples donated by the public has returned a 94% accuracy rate. Those are your headlines on Talk Radio TV.
Kickstart your weekends with me, Kevin O'Sullivan, Saturday and Sunday on Talk Radio from 7 a.m. Great guests, forthright opinions and lots of fun. Join me, Kevin O'Sullivan, on Talk Radio.
Talk Radio. Traffic and travel.
In Leicestershire, the M1 northbound is blocked after a collision. It's happened between junctions 20 and 21. That's Lutterworth towards junction 21 at Leicester. Queues are building there. The M3 in Surrey, the coastbound carriageway, is partly blocked by a broken down car. It's in the inside lane just after junction 2 for the M25. And in Staffordshire, the M6 northbound partly blocked by a broken down car. That's just after junction 16 for Stoke-on-Trent. I'm Adam Moore.
Ian Collins, weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
We got so much response on so many things from Norwich. What are we going to do with all the cows? Maybe we send all the cows to Norwich Council when we stop eating them. They can all go and live in Norwich. And the Leslie, the Green councillor we had on, can look after them in a big kind of Dr. Dolittle-like kind of place. And Leslie's just inundated, surrounded by piglets and chickens and cows. She'd do it all right, wouldn't she? She'd do it all right. Let's go back to your calls. Nigel in Cheshire. What are you thinking, Nigel? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, yep.
All right?
Yeah, good, thanks. Fire away.
Yeah, I've just had some lovely crispy duck in pancakes.
Have you really? Nice.
Yeah.
How was it?
Just for all the meat eater bashers out there.
Go for it.
Absolutely beautiful. First point, Norwich Council, absolute disgrace. I'm not sure what they pay that Leslie to do, but I don't think she's got a clue about anything. Are you still there?
I'm still here, yeah. Sorry, I got tangled up in my headphones for a second. But I could hear you.
Yeah, right. Now, this Black Lives Matter, it's creating a huge problem out of something that was a small problem.
I think that's true, yes. It was a significant problem, but it's made a problem that was being dealt with much bigger than it was.
You will always have your half-wit racists.
Of course.
You'll never, ever get rid of that kind of person. But what they're doing now, they're telling us all we're racist. I've got 2 teenage children, 19 and 15. They never saw colour. They do now.
Interesting,
because
isn't
they're
it?
actually constantly being told they're racist. Now, I can't watch football anymore because I'm sick to death of seeing them take the knee. I lived for me football. I've actually cancelled my Sky subscription because I only pay for it for the football. I will not watch the football. I'm sick of watching them take the knee. So that's that.
Yeah.
You're watching the telly, the adverts come on. Why is everybody in the adverts now black? What's the point? What's the point they're trying to make?
I think they're I know what they're trying to do, and I understand what they're trying to do, but what has happened in the meantime, you're absolutely right to point out about the way the narrative, Nigel, has flicked on this. I was talking to some mates at the weekend, and one of their kids who's 16, she was saying that this subject dominates everything that happens at school. It never did. We were bringing up a group of kids who were the most liberal and open-minded of any group in our human journey. And we were doing that really successfully. And then somehow, through the agitators and the provocateurs, we have managed to turn previously liberalised children into confused, annoyed and festering race warriors, whatever side of the argument they found themselves having to pick a colour on, almost, to excuse the metaphor. And that was never there. Things were going along nicely. Not perfect, but going along nicely. Listen, Nigel, thank you. I get the frustration. I understand it. I think it's interesting you mentioned, because we mentioned TV commercials before. It's more likely, actually, what you see is a mixed race family, because advertisers are making sure they want to tick every box. They don't want to accept the white folk, the black folk, the brown folk, or anyone else in between. So they go, we have sort of mixed race families in nearly everything. That will kind of address the issue. As if there was a huge... And then you've got disproportionality in some areas. What was it, EastEnders that got into trouble a few years ago for having too many non-white people in a single episode? And they had to row back. Somebody said, it doesn't look like... East London never looked like that. That's very strange. I hear what you're saying. Martin, come on, Martin, sort it out. What's going on?
All this pandering to the black community, it's bordering on offensive now. Because it's like these left-wing lunatics, they see black people as so thick, so infantile.
So you don't feel they're representing, as a black guy, Martin, you don't feel they're representing you?
Well, I'm 37 years old. It's like, in my entire life, I've never had to deal with racism growing up in England. It's like now we have to imagine and pretend like there's racism everywhere behind every bush. And it's like these left-wing people have found that if they keep on incentivizing the idea of racism, it gains them votes. And they don't have the integrity to even research it. They just feel that all they have to do is pretend they're against racism, and then they're a nice person, and then they win the prize, and they're going to get black people to vote for them. And partly that is the black community's fault, because when they're incentivized by freebies, or we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we tend to vote as some collective bloc for these idiots like David Lannys of the world and the Diane Abbotts. And I'm getting sick to death with it. This country is a fantastic country to live in if you're a black person. There's no real racism to deal with. And when it comes to these people being killed by police, it's not a scientist. It's never like a school teacher. It's always a criminal. And they keep on like martifying these criminals like they're these great people we should hold up like Jesus Christ.
Well, I said at the beginning, you know, whatever you think of George Floyd, he's not Rosa Parks, is he? I mean, he doesn't even get anywhere near. Listen, it's powerful stuff. Thank you. And just to reiterate, and this is relevant for any of the bedwetters out there, Martin is a black guy himself, and hence the reason why he has very strong views in that position. 0344 499 1000. Back to the issue of vegetarianism. Ian says, for me, it's the whole vibe of the meal. If someone can mock up a veggie roast with all the trimmings and a few glasses of red, I'm there. It's funny because our producer Ryan, who ordinarily, I mean, he wouldn't even take the feathers off a chicken. He'd eat it. Yesterday had a nut roast. It's called nut roast, isn't it? Yeah. So a vegetarian thing, which I've had before. So if you get everything else right, all the veggies and all the, you know, the potatoes, nice bit of gravy and all the rest of it, veggie gravy, I guess, and a couple of beers or red wines, yeah, job's a good one, really. But that rack of ribs was particularly nice yesterday. Bit old tough, and I think it had too many, actually. I don't know how many ribs of pigs meant to. I think this had too many. It was 8 foot long. Is that normal? 0344 499 1000. It's Ian Collins on Talk Radio. The news at 3 is next.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV. I'm Emily Rose Adams. Here are your headlines. The international community has expressed outrage at Belarus after one of its fighter jets forced a Ryanair passenger plane to land in its country. Opposition activist says it was done to arrest the anti-government journalist Roman Protasevich, who was on board. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, says Belarus's actions will have serious implications. A former porter who worked at Great Ormond Street Hospital has been handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years after admitting a string of sexual offences against young boys. 55-year-old Paul Farrell admitted 69 offences against 8 victims between 1994 and 2020. He befriended the parents of his victims and carried out babysitting for them in order to abuse their children. The court heard he didn't target patients at the hospital. The Home Secretary has announced plans to introduce major reforms to the UK's immigration system. Priti Patel plans to introduce a US-style electronic travel authorisation which requires visitors to the UK to obtain an electronic permit before travelling. Ms Patel says the government's plans reflect the public's attitudes towards the number of people looking to move to the UK. Police say there's nothing to suggest a shooting which has left a black equal rights activist in a critical condition was a targeted attack. 27-year-old Sasha Johnson was shot in the head in Southwark in South London yesterday. Some NHS patients are being told they'll have to wait 3 years for an appointment with a dentist. Healthwatch England says surgeries are reporting having thousands of people on waiting lists, with delays that existed at the start of 2020 made worse by the pandemic. It's found people are feeling pressured into paying for private care or even ending up in hospital after overdosing on painkillers. And Spain has lifted its restrictions to allow people from Britain to travel there, although the government's urging people not to go there unless it's for essential reasons because the country is on the UK's amber travel list. Spain's tourism minister says he hopes the UK moves his country out of the amber list for travel destinations soon. Those are your headlines on Talk Radio TV.
Sometimes running a business can feel like swimming upstream in Siberia. Welcome. With a bear clinging onto your leg. But Xero online accounting software can help you manage the ins and outs of your finances in real time, so you can keep them running smoothly. Soon it will feel more like you're going down a water slide.
Your turn.
In a rubber ring. Or being serenaded by a string quartet. Search Xero with an X, because healthy business is beautiful business.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online and on DAB+. The latest news from across the globe.
When there is a lot of uncertainty, that's when businesses do invest.
All the latest reaction, information and advice.
If we have groups of young men going around whipping up hatred, and that's got huge ramifications.
Talk Radio.
On the Hour Headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Charlotte Fisher. On the way at 3, emergency talks over possible Belarus sanctions. Hospital porter given.
Kickstart your weekends with me, Kevin O'Sullivan, Saturday and Sunday on Talk Radio from 7 a.m. Great guests, forthright opinions and lots of fun. Join me, Kevin O'Sullivan, on Talk Radio.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me weekdays from 4 with the biggest stories, the noisiest guests and my daily monologue, where I lay it out straight and don't pull my punches. And then it's over to you. So let's talk. You can hear me on DAB+, in-app and online, and watch me as we stream live on YouTube every weekday from 4 on the home of free speech, Talk Radio.
Great Ormond Street Hospital has been handed a life sentence after admitting a string of sexual offences against young boys. Paul Farrell worked there between 1994 and 2020. He's admitted 69 offences against 8 victims over 35 years. The crimes have been described as multi-incident by the prosecution, with at least 500 instances of abuse. The Home Secretary has promised to introduce major reforms to the UK's immigration system. Priti Patel plans to introduce a US-style electronic travel authorisation, which requires visitors to the UK to obtain an electronic permit before travelling. Ms Patel says the government's plans reflect the public's attitudes towards the number of people looking to move to the UK.
Some still deny that immigration could ever be excessive, inanely claiming that it's only ever a question of adequate investment. This is to deny reality. People across the country do not want their communities and way of life to change beyond recognition.
The Spanish tourism minister says he expects Spain to be placed on the UK's green travel list at the government's next review after lifting restrictions this morning to welcome people from Britain. Spain is amber at the moment, so the advice is only to go there for essential reasons. And the BBC will launch a review into the effectiveness of its editorial policies and governance. It's following Lord Dyson's report into the 1995 Panorama interview with Princess Diana.
Talk Radio. National weather.
A few sunny spells but more showers for most of the UK this afternoon and feeling cold in the north and east of Scotland.
Talk Radio. Entertainment news.
The lead singer of the Italian band, which won Eurovision, will have a drugs test today. It's after speculation he had taken a substance during the show in Rotterdam. The rumours were sparked by footage of him leaning over a table.
Talk Radio. Entertainment news.
At Vision Express, all our glasses come with free lifetime servicing.
Free lifetime servicing? Nice one.
And a free 100-day returns guarantee.
Free 100-day returns guarantee? Cracking.
And they start from just £25.
Only £25 and all? Top stuff.
That's why we're proud to say you'll see more for less with Vision Express.
I like it.
Book and shop now at visionexpress.com. Applies to selected styles from the Scene range. Single vision lenses only. See more for less based on perception data January 2021. Terms and conditions apply.
Talk Radio. Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
So we're not going to leave this one alone anytime soon. It's there's almost too much in it. The local authority that decided, it must have come up in the meeting when they said, what is going on the 22nd of May? What's happening on that day? Well, it's the anniversary of those killed in Manchester in the bombing. It's also the anniversary of the death of Lee Rigby. And they decided, well, we'll ignore that and we'll focus on this instead.
In Minneapolis tonight, tensions are high as 4 police officers have been fired after a man was pinned to the ground and died. The incident was caught on camera, and we must warn you, the images are disturbing.
Norwich Council held a purple and pink light show at the weekend to commemorate the death of George Floyd. How did they arrive at that? What do you sense is the reason behind it? They may not be the only authority that do this, because actually the anniversary of his death is actually tomorrow, so there might be others. Earlier we spoke to the local Norwich Green Party councillor Leslie Graham. She was one of those who asked for City Hall to be lit up and make a stand against racism.
Another thing that died on that day is the ability of people not affected by racism to imagine, to deny the systemic racism that allows such events to happen.
Divided the room, that one. Well, not even divided. Few people on the other side of this. We'll have more of that in a few moments. We've also been talking about this.
Millions of us are risking the health of our teeth by failing to give them the care and attention they deserve. Visit your dentist regularly so that any problems can be identified and sorted quickly. A healthy smile means a healthy life.
That's if you can get a dentist, of course. Can you get... But few people can, it seems. We learned today that some people are waiting up to 3 years to see an NHS dentist. COVID strikes again, it seems. And we're also going to be talking astonishing influence on global music. 0344 499 1000.
Ian Collins, weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
Now this caught me by surprise, this story. I don't know if anybody's yet covered this, really. Israel will end local COVID-19 restrictions following a successful vaccine rollout that has nearly stamped out new infections. This is according to the country's health minister. With the majority of the population having received the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and about 92% of those 50 and older inoculated and recovered, Israel has been gradually reopening its economy after 3 lockdowns, and the country reported just 12 new cases on Saturday, down from a peak of 10,000 a day in January. My goodness. Let's speak with Nathan Jeffe, who's a journalist and speaker based in Tel Aviv. Nathan, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us, sir. I mean, this is big news, of course. I mean, Israel has been largely leading the way, I think we could say, on getting out of COVID, but this takes it to its, well, almost its natural conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge story for the rest of the world. In Israel, it's just the continuation of normal life, because most people have really kind of forgotten about the restrictions as we sit in the cafes outdoors without our masks, and a lot of people, it's a distant memory now.
So COVID largely gone. That means that, as I understand it, that people will now be able to go to cinemas without having to worry about numbers or masks or even whether they've been vaccinated or not, even though most have.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, in practical terms, we're conducting ourselves as if we have a sense of herd immunity. And what's really interesting is that even though under 16s have not been vaccinated yet, here we're not seeing significant numbers of infections among children. So very few infections among adults, and even among the children who are not vaccinated, also very few infections. So the vaccine's really doing their job here.
Yeah. And was this solely down to, you did have clearly an issue like other countries have had, and there were 3 lockdowns, so it's not as if you haven't experienced what it's like to not feel that freedom. What is this being put down to, Nathan? Good government policy, a good vaccination program, or is it down to the fact that you locked down in the first place?
It's down to the fact that we got the vaccines, we got them out there very quickly, and we got very high coverage. We didn't wait to invite people by sending them cards or anything like that. We just told everyone to get down there, get to the centres, didn't worry too much about what age people were. So when we got huge numbers of people vaccinating.
Yeah, fantastic. And is there a date set for, is there going to be, as I understand it, the green passports? I know people call them things in different ways, but they will be gone. Is that right?
Well, the green passports are actually what we're using for international travel, so those are still going to remain in place, but the green passes are going to be less relevant in future because we're just going to get back to kind of normal life.
Yeah. Good work, Nathan. Thank you. Nathan Jeffe, who's a journalist and speaker based in Tel Aviv. Normality resumed. You won't need your passport. No masks, no social distancing. Whether you've been vaccinated or not, you'll be able to get back into places like theatres and cinemas and restaurants and pubs and bars, etc. There you go. Well, that wasn't meant to be like that, was it? According to some people, they were going to keep all these restrictions going for absolutely ever. Also this, I got this in from Andy in Doncaster, which is a rather confusing text. He says, did I hear you correctly, Ian? Whatever your thoughts on George Floyd, he was no Rosa Parks. Presumably you think he was less deserving of life. If not, feel free to apologise for your clumsy language and provide an explanation. Isn't it obvious what I meant? Rosa Parks was a campaigner. He wasn't. That's it. The fact that George Floyd is being lauded as a figure, as a totemic image of the need for equality, I think will confuse some people. You might wish to highlight his case for many reasons, but I think if you're talking about racial equality, then I don't think George Floyd is the person that you would be lauding up there as the face of that. He was no Rosa Parks, no Nelson Mandela, no Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, any of those. I didn't think that needed any explanation. Nothing to do with life, more to do with about what people did with their life. And some breaking news we're just hearing as well. Former Formula One chief and privacy campaigner Max Mosley has died at the age of 81. Max Mosley was one of those guys that, I mean, it was a curious career because, of course, he started out as this, clear Formula One star and morphed latterly, I think he was a barrister as well, latterly into a privacy campaigner. And that became his thing because, of course, he took on newspapers because of, his own experience of being exposed in some headlines, etc. And he kind of completely took on a whole different feel of things. And I didn't quite understand fully where he was going with the latter, I have to be honest with you. But what I do find surprising is he looked like the kind of guy that would live till he's about 150. One of those men that just had, a certain... He was clearly very rich, he clearly lived a good lifestyle, and he looked as if all of that had brought him some kind of protection against death at any point, anytime soon. But sadly not. I don't know the circumstances of his death, but Max Mosley has died aged 81. That news just breaking. Let's go back to your comments. Mike's in York. How you doing, Mike?
Good afternoon, Ian. How
Afternoon.
are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, fire away.
Yeah, I take the point what that guy said earlier. We are plainly sick of people taking the knee to a thug. When Millwall were playing and everybody booed, they booed because of the person who was being paid homage to.
Yeah, I think that was certainly one of the reasons why lots of people booed. I mean, there were others as well, but I think you're right, and it's interesting. I was just trying to respond to Andy's text there, that I of all things you might think of George Floyd, and he may have turned his life around, and that's fine. Although the reason he was arrested is because he was suspected of some kind of was it forgery or counterfeit money? I think it was.
Notes. Yeah.
But the fact that his previous life was not a particularly pleasant one isn't the kind of person that you would want to imagine when you're thinking about issues or people to highlight certain issues. I don't think he's the man you want to front up your campaign.
Well, I mean, who do you pay homage to? Can I just kind of, first of all, let people know what George Floyd's criminal history was? He was convicted numerous times of theft. He was suspected of intimidation of his community, but obviously the people and the ladies who he intimidated withdrew the complaint simply because he was a thug. He's got an extensive criminal history. And perhaps, just perhaps, those, because if you've ever been into town on a Friday and Saturday night, you know what it's like. And perhaps that police officer, perhaps he didn't know, he knew what he would get into with a 6'6" thug. But let's look at a proper and a real, genuine paragon of virtue and a person who you can put on a pedestal, no other than Jessica Ennis-Hill. Mm-hmm. When that Sheffield decided to bring back Ched Evans, a convicted rapist at the time, Jessica Ennis-Hill said, "Hang on, I'm really proud that you got my name on that stand, but you take it off if you bring a rapist." And what Millwall was saying, in my eyes, was, by all means, kick out racist and discrimination, by all means, but don't bend your knee to a thug. Because the guy had it right. How do you tell your kids these are the people that you must now admire?
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. It's because this story is of many moving parts. And thank you, Mike, for making that point. I know people feel strongly about it. I didn't dwell on it at the beginning. I mentioned it, but I didn't dwell on it because I didn't want that to become the focus of this. And the suggestion is that this man changed his life around. And that's how he used to be, saw the error of his ways and moved on. And we will never know whether he was guilty of the counterfeit crime. None of that, of course, should be used as a way of making people feel better about the fact that he was killed, murdered by a serving police officer. And I don't think that that was the point that our last caller was making or anybody else should be making. Of course, this was a barbaric way for somebody to be dealt with by law enforcement wherever it happened to be and whatever colour they happened to be and whatever their background happened to be. So I have to get that out there, okay? And you'll understand why I have to get that out there. However, I stand by what I said, that if you are attempting to put a face up there to show how, the world can have greater racial harmony, or some of these arguments and views that have been around festering in filthy minds for years can be eradicated, I'm not so sure that he is the face of that. And I do find that an interesting jar when we put... It doesn't mean you don't dwell on other aspects of this story. Of course you do. I get that. I'm not suggesting you don't. But it would be curious if somehow we were almost canonizing somebody in that respect, because I don't think that would be right and proper in this case. In terms of booing, yeah, I think there's a bit of that. I think there's a bit of people saying, well, this is a curious, we don't agree with what happened. It was terrible, but why are we, in some way kneeling down? For other people, the taking the knee was just a simple act of subservience for other people that they thought was going too far. For others, taking the knee felt like people being made to apologise when they haven't got a racist bone in their body. I think many of us felt the same on that one. And I think overarching to that was the sense that all of these things are taking us backwards and not forwards. In fact, we are almost propping up arguments that had began to disappear and in some cases completely disappeared. But now, as I said earlier, in the minds of some young people, they really believe they're living in southern Mississippi, 1957, Pretoria, 1987, the United Kingdom, 1977. You hear people speak. I look on social media. I see how young people, kids in their late teens, how they talk about this society as if the National Front are running the place. We'd got rid of all of that. Now we've reintroduced it. And things like taking the knee and the like are responsible for reintroducing it. Don't these mad half-wits see what they've done? They've actually created the very problem, inflated the very problem they are purporting to try and solve. And of course, for many people, solving it isn't really an option. 0344 499 1000. You're listening to Ian Collins on Talk Radio. It's 20 past 3.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
Hello, I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers. The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its analysis of new Home Office figures, which suggest just 1.6% of rape cases lead to a charge. The Telegraph leads with the headline Cancer Crisis Risks Replacing the Pandemic, as experts warn that 300,000 people have missed urgent checks in the last year due to the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, the Mail and the Express's front pages state that some NHS patients are being told to wait 3 years for a dentist appointment and are resorting to using DIY filling kits. Elsewhere, the Metro's front page celebrates the UK's record-breaking jab surge, which has seen a third of people fully vaccinated. And the Mirror leads with the headline 100,000 Brits off to Spain after the country lifted all measures for UK tourists from today. But the Home Secretary is warning people not to travel to amber list countries. I'm Emily Rose Adams, and they're today's front pages on Talk Radio TV.
Kickstart your weekends with me, Kevin O'Sullivan, Saturday and Sunday on Talk Radio from 7 a.m. Great guests, forthright opinions, and lots of fun. Join me, Kevin O'Sullivan, on Talk Radio.
Brought unprecedented change. But how did the pandemic deliver more billionaires than ever before? Find out in the Sunday Times Rich List, meeting those who made millions and those who gave millions away. Don't miss the definitive guide to UK wealth. Online now at thesundaytimes.co.uk/richlist.
Did you know that playing the National Lottery raises £30 million for good causes every week? So we all get to enjoy more of this. And plenty of this. Not to mention this. Oh, get in. Ooh, some of this. And a generous helping of this. When we all play a little, fun stuff happens. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
Talk Radio. Traffic and travel.
In Leicestershire, the M1 northbound is blocked after a collision. It's happened between junctions 20 and 21. That's Lutterworth towards junction 21 at Leicester. Queues are building there. The M3 in Surrey, the coastbound carriageway, is partly blocked by a broken down car. It's in the inside lane just after junction 2 for the M25. And in Staffordshire, the M6 northbound partly blocked by a broken down car. That's just after junction 16 for Stoke-on-Trent. I'm Adam Moore.
Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
Oh, 03444991000. Let's go to Mansell, who's in Edinburgh. Mansell, how are you doing?
How are you doing, Ian?
Very well, sir. Yeah, fire away.
I'm very glad to hear it. I was really annoyed about this story from Norwich. Really, really annoyed about it. As you alluded to earlier in your show, how much did this cost? How is the roads
you do wonder, don't you?
Yeah, how are the roads, the rubbish collection, no particular road, the education, the policing, for example, the health care, the dentist, which seems to be the thing of the day, the social care, and how much is the catering costing at the AGM, which apparently is not happening.
Yes, the AGM catering.
Yeah, and how does it benefit people of colour living in Norwich? You tell me, because I'm at a loss. And as you say, I'm from Edinburgh. I've got my own problems.
Well, you've got Nicola Sturgeon to look after you. Come on.
Oh, well, I mean, you mean the Witch Queen of Ayrshire.
She speaks very well of you, Mansell.
Yeah, well, I know she was born in Irvine.
Yeah, there you go, you see.
Yeah,
One of your own, essentially.
I get into all kinds of trouble.
Nothing wrong with that. Mansell, thank you. This comes in from Sean. Well, I think it's to Mike Graham, although he's only just sent it. To Mike Graham and Talk Radio, are obsessed with two things today, dentistry and the royal family. Good job nothing else is going. We haven't touched the royal family. And dentistry is a massive story today, by the way. The fact that 3 million people might have to wait 3 years to get millions of people might have to wait 3 years to get a dental appointment is quite a big story. So you'd expect a kind of reactive news-based genre and platform to be talking about it. But the backbone for this programme today has been really what's happened in Norwich. And this one's a curious story because I'm pretty sure that this came from a tweet that somebody sent me. I don't know whether this would have got any traction at all, this story. And I do think it's relevant because it feeds into a much wider malaise that is, I think, or sense is happening in this country. And a very dangerous one, a really dangerous one. And the reason, as I stated just before the last break, that so many people feel angered by what is going on, or just maybe even confused. I think there's a certain amount of anger. I think for some people it is just basic cast iron confusion, is that I think most of us thought that we were living in a rather harmonious place. Not perfect, and nobody is going to defend acts of racism. Nobody's going to pretend that that they don't still go on. Nobody's going to pretend that there hasn't in the past been structural and institutional racism that has caused all manner of problems. Nobody would try and do that's a given, right? It doesn't even have to be said, but it clearly does, because if you don't say it, then you're accused of living in the land of the fairies and not understanding what's going on out there. However, it's not unreasonable to say that we've found ourselves in a place in the last years, in the last decade or so, where many of these things were either settled or had begun to settle, and particularly with young people. And what we've done almost in one fell swoop, helped by none other than the President of the United States, who decided to turn the death of George Floyd into a race matter. A race matter, yes. And spectacularly ignoring. If you did what Joe Biden did in a dissertation, if there was a dissertation equivalent of employing his logic and intellect, you'd be kicked out of university for crimes of idiocy. It was that stupid and that anti-intellectual and meaningless, and also dangerous as well, more than anything, dangerous. And that's turning a non-race crime, grim and barbaric as it was, but a non-race-based crime. It wasn't racial murder, no racist intent or component at all to that crime. Watch the court case if you don't believe me. Read the papers to confirm it. And yet Biden just came out and talked about nothing more. And then that other dope, Kamala Harris, I mean, you think he's bad, and she pitches up and just sort of parrots exactly the same line, but speaks as a woman of colour, and therefore one assumes that is meant to somehow authenticate the argument even more. It doesn't stop you making stuff up, which she did. And kind of just takes us right back. And, you know, I was talking to somebody at the weekend, and a friend's kid, and they were saying at school, this is the obsession. It's pronouns, and half her class want to be referred to as they or them, and not he or she, because they can, and nobody will question it. And the other half, these are all privileged white kids, by the way, and the other half are obsessed with the terrible racist country we live in. Opinions they've developed as a direct result of something that happened 4,000 miles away, and taking the knee and all those arguments that go around it, because they've listened to some of the people that have appeared on media around the world, and this country in particular, and digested the whole thing. Because who doesn't want to believe the David and Goliath story? Tom's in Blackpool. Tom, how you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, far away. Norwich.
So, not really that. I just like to say you sound very, very sheltered. You have no idea what it is really like in this country for black, Asian people. It's nothing like you make out. You're comparing it to, what was it, Mississippi in the early 1900s. That's what we're making out like it is.
1957.
It's real. Yeah, so it's real. People are racist. My girlfriend's black. I've got a nice car. Do you know how many times I've been pulled over driving my car?
No idea.
None. I'm white. Do you know how many times my girlfriend's been pulled over?
Go on.
3 times. Why? What's the difference? Same car.
Yeah.
Same places being driven around.
She's a worse driver. I don't know.
Pulled over.
Very few stats actually of women of colour being pulled over. It's interesting though.
Well, it's not just that. It's the general way that people treat black people. I've got a lot of friends that are black, Asian, and I find, say we've gone into a shop together, they'll leave, I'll be there, and they'll snigger and laugh about them. Do you know what I mean? Calling them, taking the mick out of them being Asian or black or something like that.
Well, that's just grade A racism. That's grade A racism, Tom.
This is what a lot of people in Britain are like.
Yeah, but who's saying they're not? Who's saying they're not?
You are.
No, I'm not. When have I said that? When did I say that?
You're always banging on about how people are woke and how...
I don't use the word woke. I don't even use the word woke.
I don't either. But listen, you're saying that we're making out that this country is really racist and it isn't. It is racist. Of course it is.
No, I'm not. But I was at pains to point out that there is.
I don't know what it's like where you are.
I was at pains to point out.
It is rampant for Britain.
Rampant racism. I mean, you wouldn't know you're a white bloke either if you want to play that game.
Is. Say that again.
I said you wouldn't know either then, because you're a white bloke too.
Well, yeah, but my girlfriend.
But you're enjoying joining up to something, aren't you, Tom? I can hear it, fella. I know what's going on there.
What? What are you trying to say?
So why do you think then, when I said only a fool would deny that there is racism in this country, what do you think I meant by that if I didn't mean that there was an acknowledgement of racism in this country?
But you're playing it down much less than what it genuinely is. You honestly don't, and I'm not saying this.
Well, I'm basing it on the fact that I'm basing it on the fact, Tom. I'm basing it on the fact, mate.
Someone else's.
I'm basing it on the fact that we've.
Quantitative facts and figures are never going to show what the true
and nobody is disputing it. The idea that this country is riddled with racism is a lie. Okay,
it is.
That doesn't mean to say there aren't racism, and in some areas there's more racism than others. I don't know why are you obsessed with seeing racism, Tom. We've had a black president, we've got black judges, we've got black leaders, we've got black footballers, black stars, we've got black people on TV, we've got black people in all areas of life. In a way, Tom, hang on, let me finish. In a way we've never... Tom, in a way that we've never had before. We've never had such representation. We've never made so many steps as we have done in the last decade or decade and a half, 2 decades. So nobody is saying it's perfect.
It's still not right.
Well, nobody's saying it. No, and lots of areas of criminality aren't right either, that we'll still need to keep our eye on it.
What's criminality got to do with it?
Well, racism is criminal. It's a criminal act.
I just, honestly, the only advice I would give to you is please stop talking about things that you do not know about.
But I do know about them. I do know about them, Tom, because I'm alive and I live here. I live here and I can see what is happening. I can see what you... No, you're making the classic mistake of thinking that if somebody is white, they therefore... They don't have an opinion.
I've let you speak when you've mentioned about how a few tokens have been thrown onto TV and stuff like that. Facts and figures...
There's no tokenism going on. This is the world we live in now.
You will never walk in someone like that shoes for a day.
But who's trying to pretend I can?
Well, exactly. So stop talking like you know how it is.
I didn't know. I haven't. I've not once said I know how it is. I've not once said I know how it is. I don't know. Every time I speak to somebody on the issue of race, I make the point. In fact, I use that very phrase. I can't walk in your shoes and wouldn't pretend to. But that doesn't preclude me from every tangent of the race argument. Thank you, Tom, in Blackpool. There it is. You heard what he said. And take your call on it. 0344 499 1000. I think if Tom and I sat down for a pint, we'd probably find we actually have more in common on this point than maybe he thinks. Nobody would dispute racism. Nobody would dispute the despicable nature of it. But I can comment on literally hundreds or thousands of facets of it that affect me. Like, for example, if I look around the circle of people I know, and that's either as friends or work colleagues or people that I come into contact with, how many of those people and their views on race and their views on employment or their views on education and all the issues that affect many people? That group of people that I would know there, and I would say that would be substantial over the course of my lifetime as an adult on this planet, is completely different from the group that my granddad would have known. And so I can comment on that, and I can also comment when a statistic, whichever way it goes, is bent in favour of one argument or another, whether it's pro or against or whatever it happens to be. Of course I can talk about that. I can talk about the conflation of racism and class, something I can talk about an awful lot. So, yeah, I have a dog in the race. I don't walk in shoes, but I can have opinions. And part of being a human being is to sometimes make intellectual leaps into opinions. So you can't experience it, but you can certainly make an intellectual dip into an argument and have an empathetic approach to it or an understanding of it. And more than all of that, you can learn about it as well. 0344 499 1000. It's just gone 3:30. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Talk Radio, half-hour headline.
Hello, you're watching Talk Radio TV. I'm Emily Rose Adams. Here are your headlines. The international community has expressed outrage at Belarus after one of its fighter jets forced a Ryanair passenger plane to land in its country. Opposition activist says it was done to arrest the anti-government journalist Roman Protasevich, who was on board. The Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, says Belarus's actions will have serious implications. A former porter who worked at Great Ormond Street Hospital has been handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 18 years after admitting a string of sexual offences against young boys. 55-year-old Paul Farrell admitted 69 offences against 8 victims between 1994 and 2020. He befriended the parents of his victims and carried out babysitting for them in order to abuse their children. The court heard he didn't target patients at the hospital. The Home Secretary has announced plans to introduce major reforms to the UK's immigration system. Priti Patel plans to introduce a US-style electronic travel authorisation which requires visitors to the UK to obtain an electronic permit before travelling. Ms Patel says the government's plans reflect the public's attitudes towards the number of people looking to move to the UK. Police say there's nothing to suggest a shooting which has left a black equal rights activist in a critical condition was a targeted attack. 27-year-old Sasha Johnson was shot in the head in Southwark in South London yesterday. Some NHS patients are being told they'll have to wait 3 years for an appointment with a dentist. Healthwatch England says surgeries are reporting having thousands of people on waiting lists, with delays that existed at the start of 2020 made worse by the pandemic. It's found people are feeling pressured into paying for private care or even ending up in hospital after overdosing on painkillers. And Spain has lifted its restrictions to allow people from Britain to travel there, although the government's urging people not to go there unless it's for essential reasons because the country is on the UK's amber travel list. Spain's tourism minister says he hopes the UK moves his country out of the amber list for travel destinations soon. Those are your headlines on Talk Radio TV.
With up-to-the-minute breaking news, expert guidance and non-stop conversation.
I'm less concerned about people who've been off the vaccine and don't take it.
Unparalleled radio for unprecedented times.
We might be hit by an asteroid later today, but we don't lock down just in case.
Julia Hartley-Brewer at Breakfast.
Weekday mornings from 6:30 on Talk Radio. Ian Collins. Weekday afternoons from 1 on Talk Radio.
We will return to more comment on the pressing matters of the day. But let's go to something lighter, something frankly far more enjoyable than some of the stuff we've had to talk about today. It's the 80th anniversary, really, I'd like to think. Happy birthday to Bob Dylan. We thought we would celebrate his landmark birthday in the company of Nick Stewart, music industry veteran and artist manager. Nick, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Ian. How are you? Nice to be back with you.
Yeah, lovely to have you back with us as well. What a cracking day to do it. I mean, who doesn't want to doff their cap and wish many happy returns to the mighty Bob Dylan? Few have endured the industry in the way that this man has. He's consistent. He's always been there. He continues to write and record. And he's 80.
Well, that's very succinctly and well put, if I may say so, Ian. I mean, Bob Dylan's been making music since really almost 60 years.
Yeah.
His first album came out in 1962. His early work, as I'm sure everyone will be aware, was really to do with anthems for civil rights. Think songs like Blowing in the Wind, The Times They Are A-Changing. And his first albums were much more acoustic. They were recorded very sparingly and were very lyrically driven, and some were quite angry. And I thought the first track we might have a little peep at, or a little listen to rather, comes from The Times They Are A-Changing, and it's called With God on Our Side. And I think you'll get an early indication for some of the younger listeners of what he was like in the early 60s.
Let's have a listen.
The country I come from is called the Midwest. I started
Just listening to that, and I know everybody will pick up on the distinctive nature of Bob Dylan's voice, but that really does hammer it home, doesn't it? I mean, there is something of absolute beauty in that man's vocal talents and abilities.
And add to that at the time it's very simple language, simple, plain Midwest American language. The man from Duluth, who arrived in New York and soaked up what was going on in New York, soaked up the folk scene and all the rest of it. It's very simple language, and it reached out, and it captured the imagination in the same for the sort of white rock music lovers, in the same way that Sam Cooke did with A Change Is Gonna Come, which again, and all that wonderful black music, which again, incredibly simple. And Dylan was also very simple.
Yeah.
And he plowed his furrows through those first three albums. And then in 1965, he, rather like David Bowie did when he kept changing persona and everything else, Dylan got himself a band, Al Cooper, Mike Bloomfield, Kenny Buttrey, and produced, three unbelievable records, bringing it all back home, Blonde on Blonde. And in the middle, the record that really changed everything, which was Highway 61 Revisited. And I don't know where you're going to play the clip from on Like a Rolling Stone, but Bruce Springsteen, when he heard Like a Rolling Stone, said when that click of that snare drum at the start of the song began, it felt like a door opening.
Yeah. Well, listen, let's have a listen, Like a Rolling Stone. I wonder if that's in the sort of ballpark of, they talk about the X factor that somebody's got. And largely it doesn't matter whether you're a huge Dylan fan or not. Like a kind of an Aretha Franklin figure. You don't have to be an Aretha Franklin fan or even a purchaser of her music to be able to assess and accurately conclude the qualities there, whether that's vocally or in any other form, the performance as well. And that, I guess, is the whole Dylan thing, isn't it? It's that a man who's perhaps his audience should have been stuck in a very kind of narrow, Midwesterly kind of sector of society that only a few people would have been aware of. It's this folky guy, this Dylan guy. It's amazing what he does, It's a little secret we've got. But actually, what happened with Dylan is that it went way beyond that, and something sprung out and said, actually, this guy is bigger than just his own genre. He's bigger than just his own voice. A man whose talents just kind of transcended conventional appetites of music, Nick, in a way, because he really did hop out of his own comfort zone and his own genre and found himself in this global superstar light, whereas it would have been quite easy to imagine a singer of his background, the kind of things that he wrote, to simply play to a rather smaller parochial gallery.
I think that's a very good point. I mean, someone said that Dylan was the sort of latter-day bard. There were references made to Shakespeare, and of course in Desolation Row, he did reference two of the great poets, Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot, and I think he's nearer to T.S. Eliot. I mean, Desolation Row is Dylan's version of The Wasteland. In fact, you could say that his most recent work, Rough and Rowdy Ways, was a kind of a wasteland in the track Motor Most Foul. He has an ability, what he does and what he's done all his life, he's written very, very clever and very appealing and very coverable songs. When I was doing some research for a playlist I did on the number of covers, over 1,000 artists have covered over 360 songs that Dylan has written.
Wow.
I think he's the most covered artist going. And
That's
if you
a great
take
fact.
I think there are some great versions. Jimi Hendrix reinvented All Along the Watchtower. You opened this little segment with Bob singing Mr. Tambourine Man. Look what the Byrds did to that, and look at what the effect was on the American music business with that jingle jangle noise. He was all the way through. I mean, even on Changing of the Guards, one of his later great songs, it was redone by Patti Smith. And a lot of people think Patti Smith's version is better than Bob's.
Yeah.
And, that's often the way.
Do you think he'd be all right with that?
Oh, yeah. He would be Leonard Cohen, a poet who became a singer. Bob Dylan, a singer who became a poet.
Yeah.
That's a line that's often quoted. His songwriting has got, I think, better and better. Those people, those of your listeners who've engaged with a lot of the 60s stuff and all of that 70s, the run of albums he's made in the last 10 years are outstanding. I mean, talking about the ones that contain songs like Thunder on the Mountain and It's Not Dark Yet and all that.
Nick,
So
we're going to play
the other song I was going to suggest,
go on.
suggest you played, was he won an Oscar in 2001. You don't think about Bob getting an Oscar.
You don't, do
if
you?
you don't believe, no. But also, I think it's a lovely speech he gives to the Academy, which is easily available on YouTube if you want to see it.
Sure.
The song is called Things Have Changed. It was Curtis Hanson's film, The Wonder Years. He made a great video for it. And again, this is 2001. Listen to the lyrics of this. It's a very, very clever.
I mean, again, you don't
But
have to
you
be a
still-
connoisseur of Dylan to appreciate what's
No.
going on in that.
And you detect the mellowing of his voice. And with the mellowing of his voice comes the mellowing of his lyrics, the mellowing of his songs.
Yeah.
And the recent work is in some ways every bit as interesting, fascinating, and has the longevity of his work from the 60s.
Listen, Nick, on that point, we could have gone on for a lot longer, but thank you for that. Why not? We're saying our own happy birthday to Bob Dylan. He sold more than 125 million albums around the world. Never had a number one single, though, in either America or the UK. How does that happen? I mean, people like Andy's just got in touch, said, I'm 42, not big Bob Dylan fan, but he has been the soundtrack to most of my life. And it's only when you hear that, it's a bit like when we were tasting wine the other day, or beer, wasn't it? When somebody says, right, really think about this, as we did with the beer, and you suddenly start to find flavour and taste that you had previously just ignored. You just drank it down. When somebody says, have a think about what's there. And similarly with the Dylan stuff, you listen to those three tracks, three very different tracks as well. You just hear the purity and the dominance and the artistic superstardom of a bloke like him. I mean, that last track has made me think I've got to go home and listen to that now. Bob Dylan is 80 today. We're going to go back to your calls on Talk Radio next.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app.
Hello, I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers. The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude in the wake of the Martin Bashir scandal. The Sun leads with Boris to marry Carrie, with the paper revealing the Prime Minister will marry his fiancée Carrie Simons next summer, saying the couple have sent out save the date cards to family and friends. The Guardian focuses on its analysis of new Home Office figures, which suggest just 1.6% of rape cases lead to a charge. The Telegraph leads with the headline Cancer Crisis Risks Replacing the Pandemic, as experts warn that 300,000 people have missed urgent checks in the last year due to the COVID pandemic. Meanwhile, the Mail and the Express's front pages state that some NHS patients are being told to wait 3 years for a dentist appointment and are resorting to using DIY filling kits. Elsewhere, the Metro's front page celebrates the UK's record-breaking jab surge, which has seen a third of people fully vaccinated. And the Mirror leads with the headline 100,000 Brits off to Spain after the country lifted all measures for UK tourists from today. But the Home Secretary is warning people not to travel to amber list countries. I'm Emily Rose Adams, and they're today's front pages on Talk Radio TV.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me weekdays from 4 with the biggest stories, the noisiest guests, and my daily monologue, where I lay it out straight and don't pull my punches. And then it's over to you. So let's talk. You can hear me on DAB+, in-app and online, and watch me as we stream live on YouTube every weekday from 4 on the home of free speech, Talk Radio.
Kickstart your weekends with me, Kevin O'Sullivan, Saturday and Sunday on Talk Radio from 7 a.m. Great guests, forthright opinions, and lots of fun. Join me, Kevin O'Sullivan, on Talk Radio.
on Talk Radio.
I think the other point as well, which I didn't raise, was it Tom in Blackpool that called us? I think it was, wasn't it? It was a lovely guy. But the point about the law and racism, which has never been more focused and pronounced than it is now. And if the incidents that he talked about in a shop or anything like that, then they're acts of racism that he's describing there and should be reported as such. And we've never lived in an era where that kind of thing hasn't been taken more seriously than it is today. That's a massive game changer. The workplace, the laws on equality around the workplace, etc. Who can get a job? The some people call positive discrimination, not everybody's cup of tea, but all of these things exist. There's hundreds of rules and elements of law that have changed beyond recognition inside the last 2 decades. So don't anybody talk about the fact there hasn't been improvements. Nobody suggests that means you don't continue to strive for more. Steve's in Hornchurch. Steve, how are you doing?
Hi, Ian. How you doing?
I'm very well,
thanks.
thanks.
Before, I'm a white guy with a black wife and mixed-race children.
We have spoken before.
Yeah, I admire Tom's passion, but I think whether he's with the same lady or not in 10 years' time, he'll change his attitude. There's something called McCarthyism. You've heard of it, haven't you?
Of course, yeah.
Under the bed.
Yeah.
If you look for something everywhere, mate, you're going to find it. My mixed-race daughters seem to think that their complexion's been an advantage in life, actually.
Interesting.
And the most disenfranchised people in this country, we all know why, working-class boys. Half of my family are black, but they don't come from the crazy side. We don't live our lives as victims. These characters that was... Listen, there's 70 million people here. Of course there is a load of racists. It's called human nature, unfortunately, with some people. But you know what? These people that were sniggering in the shop, maybe they didn't like the girl's shoes or something. How did you even know it's racist?
Yeah, I know. You're absolutely right. If you look for it and you're radicalised around it, you will find it.
And a little bit of advice to Tom, I hope he's listening. This persistent doing down of this country, which isn't institutionally racist, polarises people. My pals, who haven't got an interest in politics, are becoming politicised. Yeah. They feel guilty just for existing.
I get it. Steve, it's a good point to finish on. And you've reminded me as well, Steve, of a friend of mine. She's black and she was going out with a white guy and he was a very politicised kind of left-wing guy. This was some years ago. And she said wherever they went, every time somebody looked at them, he would make the point, look, they're looking at us, oh yeah. And he was almost ready to step in at any moment to go, yeah, so what, mixed race couple, what's your problem, sunshine? And she kept saying, well, that's not, they're just looking at us because they're saying hello, because we're coming into a restaurant. No, he didn't look at us in a funny way. But as he just said then, if you want to look for it, none of this means that things don't exist and there aren't terrible things that go on. Only an absolute fool would suggest otherwise. But his first point was absolutely bang on, that if you want to look for something, you will always find it. Every microaggression, every issue, every problem could be interpreted as that if you want it to. And you could play that same game in any area of identitarian politics that you wish, whether it's about your class, your gender, your sexuality, anything you like. You could play that game all day long and there's never a solution. Sorry, Tom in Blackpool. That's it from us. We are back tomorrow at 1. Mark Dolan's here on the other side of the news. Afternoon to you, Mark.
Great to have you be here, I should say, and great 3 hours. Really enjoyed the programme today, Ian, and we're going to pick up the baton at 4. It's rainy outside, but I've got sunshine in my heart.
Oh, that's nice.
All of the noises around COVID are good. Cases down, deaths down, the vaccine works. The Indian variant, it turned out over the weekend, may not be in any way more transmissible than the other variants. And we have a government with a backbone now. They pushed back against cancelling the Freedom Monday. So I'm feeling optimistic, but we'll ask our audience whether they're thinking that freedom's coming to 0344 499 1000. Not so great on the Eurovision front. So we're going to have a bit of fun today. Should Britain dump Eurovision?
Should Britain dump Eurovision? Final word goes to Pablo on going vegan. He says, you'll have to prize my gold top Jersey milk, blue cheese, lamb curry and creamy butter from my cold, dead hands. I'm with you, Pablo. The news at 4 is next.
Online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
This is
Hello, I'm Emily Rose Adams, and these are the stories on the front pages of today's papers. The Times leads with the headline Culture Secretary calls for changes at the BBC as he accuses the corporation of having a we know best attitude